Millions of people visit America's national parks every year, seeking peace and breathtaking views. We assume that if we stay on the trail, we are safe. But for some, the forest simply swallows them whole. Today, we are covering the 12 most disturbing unexplained disappearances in history. From impossible climbs to vanishing children, these cases defy all logic. So hit that subscribe button, check your survival gear, and let's enter the woods. Let me take you back to June 14th, 1969, Father's Day weekend. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is packed, families everywhere, kids running around, the smell of campfire smoke drifting through the trees. This isn't some remote, forbidding wilderness. This is America's most visited national park. Spence Field, where our story takes place, is a high-altitude grassy meadow. It's beautiful up there. Panoramic views, soft grass, wildflowers. It's the kind of place where you spread out a blanket and let your kids run around because you can see everything. Open, safe, controlled. The Martin family, William, his father Clyde, and William's two sons, Douglas and Dennis, are camping up there. They'd hiked in from Cades Cove the day before, spent the night at Russell Field, and made their way to Spence Field that Saturday afternoon. It's Father's Day weekend, remember. This is supposed to be a celebration, quality time, fresh mountain air. Dennis Lloyd Martin is 6 years old, not quite 7. His birthday is in 6 days. He's a small kid, maybe a little shy. He has a speech impediment, enrolled in a special education program, but he's a normal, happy child. And here's the detail that matters most. Dennis is wearing a bright red t-shirt, not a muted brown or forest green. Bright red. The kind of color that screams, "Here I am," against the backdrop of green trees and grass. If you're trying to spot a child in the wilderness, this is exactly what you want them to wear. High visibility. Easy to track. Now, there are other families at Spence Field that day. Another family, unrelated but also named Martin, has 2 boys around the same age. The kids start playing together. 4 boys total. They're running around, doing what kids do. The adults are resting, chatting, enjoying the day. Everything is normal. Everything is safe. And then, the boys come up with a prank. The 4 boys split into 2 pairs. They're going to circle around through the brush and jump out to scare the adults. It's innocent. It's exactly the kind of thing kids do on a camping trip. Dennis and his brother Douglas head off in one direction. The other 2 Martin boys go the other way. William Martin, Dennis's father, watches his sons move toward the edge of the field. Dennis steps behind a large bush to hide. His father sees him. Red shirt, clear as day. The bush isn't far, maybe 20, 30 feet. It's not like Dennis wandered into deep forest. He stepped behind a shrub to hide for a game. Now, here's the thing. Kids are not quiet, especially 6-year-olds playing a prank. They giggle, they rustle branches, they step on twigs. The time frame we're talking about here is minutes, less than 5 minutes. Douglas and the other 2 boys execute the prank. They jump out, yelling. The adults laugh. Dennis doesn't appear. William waits. Maybe Dennis is still hiding, waiting for his moment. Maybe he's scared he missed his cue. Fathers know that hesitation, the moment when you think, he's fine, he's just being shy. But then that hesitation turns into something else. Concern. Then panic. William walks over to the bush. It's empty. He calls Dennis's name. Nothing. He starts moving through the area, calling louder. The other adults join in. They're searching the immediate area, voices echoing across the field. "Dennis! Dennis, where are you?" By 4:40 p.m., William Martin is running. He's sprinting down the trail, screaming his son's name. He covers nearly 2 miles, checking every turn, every shadow. Other campers join the search. By evening, park rangers are notified. By nightfall, this is officially a missing child case. And then the weather turns. That night, the very night Dennis vanishes, a massive storm system rolls into the Smokies. We're talking about torrential rain. Nearly 3 inches of water dumped on those mountains in a matter of hours. The temperature plummets to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. For a 6-year-old in a t-shirt and shorts, this is a death sentence if he's exposed. But it's worse than that for the search teams. The rain doesn't just make things cold and miserable. It erases everything. Think about what a storm like that does. It washes away footprints. It floods creek beds, turning them into raging channels. It scours the ground, washing soil and debris into gullies. And most critically for search and rescue, it destroys scent. Bloodhounds rely on skin cells, microscopic particles that humans shed constantly. Rain, especially heavy rain, chemically obliterates that trail. It's called a wipe event in forensic terms. After that storm, tracking Dennis by scent became almost impossible. By morning, the search has exploded. This isn't just a local ranger operation anymore. The National Guard shows up, helicopters, hundreds of volunteers. And then something very unusual happens. The Green Berets arrive, Special Forces soldiers from Warner Robins Air Force Base. They're not just helping, they're running their own operation, separate from the civilian command structure. They set up their own communication systems. They search in armed units. And when they leave, they don't tell anyone what they found. Over the next 2 weeks, the search becomes the largest in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains. At its peak, there are 3,400 people combing the area. That's not a typo. 1,400 searchers covering 56 square miles of terrain. They grid search every ravine, every thicket, every boulder field. They find nothing. No red shirt, no shoe, no bone fragment. By June 29th, the search is scaled back. By September, it's officially closed. Dennis Martin stepped behind a bush in broad daylight, surrounded by family, and ceased to exist. Now, the official conclusion, the FBI, the Park Service, the consensus, is that Dennis got lost and died of exposure. A tragic accident. A child wanders into the woods, gets disoriented, succumbs to hypothermia during the storm, and his body is hidden by the terrain or scavenged by animals. It's the safe explanation, the rational one. But let's look at the logic gaps, because they're everywhere. First, the timeline doesn't work. Dennis vanished in less than 5 minutes. He didn't scream. He didn't cry out. His father was within earshot. The other boys were within earshot. No one heard anything. Now, if you've ever been around a 6-year-old who's scared, you know they make noise. They call for help. They panic. But Dennis went silent instantly. How does a child who just stepped behind a bush for a game suddenly become so disoriented that he runs deeper into the woods without making a sound? And it's not just about getting lost. Let's say Dennis somehow got turned around and started walking the wrong direction. He's wearing a red shirt in an area with open sightlines. The search began almost immediately. Within hours, there were dozens of people calling his name, spreading out from that exact spot. Within a day, there were hundreds. Within a week, over 1,000. They covered 56 square miles. They used dogs, helicopters, thermal imaging, nothing. No trace, no scrap of clothing, no footprint that couldn't be explained away. How far can a 6-year-old travel in rough terrain in 5 minutes? A few hundred feet at most. The search radius extended for miles in every direction. If Dennis had simply gotten lost and died of exposure, the official theory, his body should have been found. The terrain isn't that impossible. People hike there all the time. Second, the Key family sighting. Here's where it gets truly strange. On the afternoon of June 14th, roughly an hour after Dennis vanished, a man named Harold Key was hiking with his family in the Sea Branch area, approximately 5 to 7 miles from Spence Field. Key heard something that stopped him cold, an enormous, sickening scream. Not an animal, not a bird, a sound of primal terror, human terror. Moments later, Key saw a man. He described him as rough-looking, unkempt, almost feral, not a clean-cut camper, but someone who looked like they lived in the woods. And here's the critical detail. Key said this man appeared to be carrying something over his shoulder. He saw a flash of red fabric, red, like Dennis's shirt. Key reported this to authorities. The FBI investigated, and then they dismissed it. Their reasoning? The time-distance calculation didn't work. They argued that a man on foot couldn't travel from Spence Field to Sea Branch, 7 miles through rugged terrain, in the time that elapsed. Therefore, it couldn't have been Dennis. But here's the logic gap. If Dennis was taken, he wasn't the one walking. The predator was. And a grown man, especially someone who knows the terrain, can cover 7 miles in rough country in an hour. It's not comfortable, but it's possible. Trail runners do it all the time. Someone fleeing with a child over their shoulder, motivated by adrenaline and fear of capture? Absolutely possible. And then there's the scream. Key described it as sickening, not playful, not the sound of a lost child calling for help, a scream of terror. What makes a 6-year-old scream like that? The FBI dismissed Key's sighting because it didn't fit the lost boy narrative. But what if the narrative was wrong? Third, the footprints. Early in the search, trackers found footprints, not animal tracks, human tracks. One print was described as a simple heel, consistent with Dennis's Oxford shoes. But there was another print, a boot, and then, strangely, a bare footprint. What kind of person walks through the Smoky Mountains with one boot and one bare foot? Dwight McCarter, a legendary tracker and ranger who worked the Martin case, noted these tracks. They didn't belong to any of the searchers. They didn't belong to the Martin family. They were anomalous. But the Park Service, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of searchers trampling the area, couldn't preserve them. By the time anyone thought to cast the prints, they'd been obliterated. The site was stomped to death by 1,400 well-meaning volunteers. Fourth, the Green Berets. Why were Special Forces soldiers involved in a civilian search for a lost child? That's not standard protocol. The official explanation is that they were nearby and offered to help. But their behavior was unusual. They operated independently. They were heavily armed, not typical for a search and rescue operation. And when they left, they didn't share their findings with the civilian search coordinators. There are rumors, unconfirmed but persistent, that the Green Berets were hunting someone or something. Locals have long whispered about feral people living deep in the Smokies, individuals or small groups who've gone off-grid, living in caves and avoiding civilization. Is it possible the military suspected Dennis had been taken by someone living in the backcountry, someone they didn't want the public to know about? We don't know. The records are sealed or lost, but the presence of armed Special Forces soldiers searching for a 6-year-old boy raises questions that have never been adequately answered. The Dennis Martin case changed how the National Park Service conducts searches. The mass saturation approach, throwing 1 of 400 people at a problem, was abandoned. It destroyed too much evidence. Now, searches prioritize smaller, highly trained teams of trackers who can preserve forensic details. But it was too late for Dennis. He was never found. No red shirt washed up in a creek. No bones discovered by hikers decades later. No shoe, no scrap of fabric, no trace. The largest search in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains turned up nothing. His father, William Martin, spent the rest of his life searching. He returned to Spence Field year after year, walking the trails, calling his son's name into the silence. He died in 2020, never knowing what happened. So what do we make of this? A 6-year-old boy steps behind a bush in broad daylight, surrounded by family in one of the most visited national parks in America. And he's gone, erased, as if he never existed. The FBI says he got lost and died, but the timeline doesn't support it. The search coverage doesn't support it. The witness testimony doesn't support it. Something happened to Dennis Martin in those 5 minutes, something fast, something silent. And whatever it was, it left no trace. The Great Smoky Mountains are beautiful, they're popular, they're safe, until they're not. And somewhere in those 500,000 acres of forest, there's an answer. A red shirt, a bone, something. But after 56 years, the wilderness has kept its secret. Dennis Martin stepped behind a bush and vanished, and the mountain never gave him back. Labor Day weekend, 1974, the end of summer. That last long weekend before school starts, before the routines kick back in, before autumn pulls the curtain on outdoor freedom, families all over America are squeezing in one final camping trip, one last hurrah under the sun. And in the Siskiyou Mountains of southern Oregon, near a tiny hamlet called Copper, the Cowden family is doing exactly that. Let me set the scene for you. The Siskiyou Range sits right on the Oregon-California border. Rugged, forested, crisscrossed with logging roads and old mining trails. It's not the pristine, tourist-friendly wilderness of a national park. This is working land. Loggers, hunters, locals who know every dirt road and creek bed. The Applegate Valley, where the Cowdens were camping near Carberry Creek, is dense with Douglas fir and ponderosa pine. It's isolated, but not forbiddingly so. People camp here all the time. It's familiar territory. And the weather? Hot. We're talking 95 degrees Fahrenheit on September 1st. Scorching. The kind of heat that makes you move slow, that makes you want to stay in the shade, that makes a cold stream sound like paradise. This detail matters. Remember it. Now, the Cowden family. Richard Cowden, 28 years old, is a logging truck driver from White City, Oregon. This isn't some city guy who decided to try camping for the first time. Richard knows these woods. He drives through them for a living. He knows the roads, the terrain, the risks. His wife, Belinda, is 22. They have 2 kids, David, who's 5 years old, and Melissa, who's just 5 months old, an infant, a baby. This is a young family, but they're not inexperienced. They're not tourists fumbling with a tent manual. They know what they're doing. They pack up their gear, load up the truck, and head out to Carberry Creek for a weekend of camping. It's routine. It's safe. It's supposed to be fun. The Cowdens set up camp near Carberry Creek sometime around August 30th. It's a nice spot, shaded, close to water, accessible by vehicle. The kind of place where you can back your truck right up to the site, unload your cooler, set up your tent, and get a fire going without breaking a sweat. They settle in. The holiday weekend stretches ahead of them. Sunday morning, September 1st, around 9 a.m., Richard and his son David walk into the Copper General Store. It's a small place, the kind of general store that sells a little bit of everything. Groceries, fishing tackle, cold drinks, ice. Richard buys a quart of milk. The store clerk is Belinda's mother, Ruth Grayson. She sees them. They chat. Richard and David seem happy, relaxed, nothing unusual. They head back to the campsite. That's the last confirmed sighting of the Cowden family alive. Now, here's what we know happens next. Or rather, what we know doesn't happen. The Cowdens were supposed to show up for dinner at Ruth Grayson's house that evening. They don't arrive. Ruth waits. She figures maybe they lost track of time, maybe they're running late. But as the evening stretches on, the worry kicks in. By nightfall, she drives out to the campsite to check on them. And this is where the story takes a turn into something that doesn't make sense. Ruth arrives at the campsite. The truck is there. The tent is there. The camping gear is laid out. Everything looks normal, except there's no one there. No Richard, no Belinda, no kids. No sounds of a family packing up or getting ready to leave. Just silence. But it's what Ruth sees that makes this scene so deeply unsettling. Because the campsite isn't ransacked. It's not torn apart. There's no sign of a struggle. It looks like the family just stood up and walked away mid-activity. Let me describe this to you in detail, because the details are what haunt investigators to this day. There's a plastic dishpan sitting on the ground. It's filled with cold water, like someone was about to wash dishes or rinse something off. There's a carton of milk sitting on the picnic table, not tipped over, not spilled, just sitting there in the sun where Richard had placed it that morning after walking back from the store. Some reports say there was food prepped for dinner, like they were in the middle of making a meal. And here's the kicker. Their valuables are still there. Richard's expensive wristwatch is on the ground. His wallet is nearby. Belinda's purse is on the table. The truck keys are there. Fishing gear, expensive tackle and rods are sitting untouched. The only thing missing is the family. And the only items they're not wearing are their street clothes, which are neatly folded in the truck. They were in their swimsuits, all of them. A 28-year-old man, a 22-year-old woman, a 5-year-old boy, and an infant, in swimsuits, on a 95-degree day. Oh, and one more thing. The family dog, a basset hound named Droopy, is missing too. Ruth Grayson raises the alarm. Authorities respond. A search begins. And the campsite, this frozen-in-time tableau, becomes the center of one of the most baffling abduction cases in Oregon history. The next morning, September the 2nd, Droopy the Basset Hound shows up at the Copper General Store, miles away from the campsite, scratching at the door. The dog is alive, unharmed, but alone. How did the dog get there? Why was the dog spared? No one knows. And then, for 7 months, nothing. No bodies, no clues, no ransom, no word. The Cowden family has vanished. April 12, 1975. 2 gold prospectors are hiking through rough, steep terrain near Carberry Creek, about 7 miles from the campsite. They're off-trail, bushwhacking through dense brush and rocks, when they stumble across something no one wants to find. Bodies. Richard Cowden is found tied to a tree. Belinda, David, and baby Melissa are found wedged into a small rock fissure nearby, a natural cave or crevice. The remains are skeletal. They've been out there all winter. Cause of death is eventually determined. Belinda and David were shot in the head with a .22 caliber weapon. Melissa died from severe head trauma. Richard's cause of death is harder to determine due to decomposition, but investigators believe he was executed as well. The Cowden family didn't just disappear. They were murdered. And the milk carton on the table, the one sitting in the sun back at the campsite on September 1st, becomes the defining image of this case. A family interrupted. So let's talk about what doesn't make sense. Because when you actually look at the facts, the physical evidence, the logistics, the timeline, this case falls apart in ways that are deeply disturbing. First, the campsite was too calm. Think about the scene Ruth Grayson found: a carton of milk sitting upright on a picnic table, a wash basin filled with water. Valuables scattered but not taken. No overturned chairs, no scattered gear, no signs of a struggle. Now imagine you're the Cowden family. You're at your campsite. Maybe you're preparing dinner. Maybe the kids are playing. And suddenly, someone, or multiple someones, appears, armed, threatening, demanding you come with them. What's your reaction? Do you calmly stand up, leave your milk on the table, and walk away? Or do you panic? Do you try to grab your baby? Do you knock over the table as you scramble to protect your kids? Do you scream? If a gunman storms into a campsite and orders a family to move, there's chaos, there's noise. Things get knocked over. But the Cowden campsite was pristine. It looked like the family was plucked into the sky. One moment they're there, the next they're gone. How do you control 4 people, 2 adults and 2 children, one of them an infant, so completely that they don't even disturb a carton of milk? It doesn't add up. Either the family knew their abductor and didn't perceive immediate danger, or the control was so absolute, so sudden, that they didn't have time to react. But even that doesn't explain the milk. Second, the valuables were left behind. Here's another logic gap. If this was a robbery gone wrong, the robbers failed spectacularly. Richard's wristwatch, expensive, easily pawned, was left on the ground. His wallet containing cash was left behind. Belinda's purse was on the table. The truck was loaded with camping gear, fishing equipment, and supplies, all valuable, all left untouched. So if money wasn't the motive, what was? Sexual assault. Investigators found no evidence of that. The bodies, when recovered, showed gunshot wounds and blunt force trauma, but no signs of sexual violence. Revenge? A grudge? Maybe. But then why take the whole family? Why not just target Richard? And why leave the dog alive? The more you examine the motive, the murkier it gets. This wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a random act of violence. It was targeted. It was planned. But why? Third, the terrain doesn't make sense. Let's talk about logistics. The Cowden family was found 7 miles from their campsite in incredibly rugged, steep terrain. We're not talking about a hiking trail. We're talking about dense brush, rocky outcrops, steep slopes, the kind of terrain where you have to watch every step or you'll twist an ankle or worse. Now ask yourself, how do you force a family to hike 7 miles through that kind of terrain? And more importantly, how do you do it with a 5-month-old baby? Think about that. Melissa Cowden was an infant. She couldn't walk. She had to be carried. She needed to be fed, changed, comforted. Babies are loud. They cry, they make noise, and they slow everything down. If you're an abductor trying to move 4 people through rough terrain, an infant is a nightmare. It's tactically stupid. The baby cries, giving away your position. The baby slows you down, making it easier for searchers to catch up. The baby requires constant attention, limiting your ability to control the other hostages. So why didn't the killer leave the baby behind? Or worse, why not kill her at the campsite and avoid the complication entirely? Unless, and this is the chilling part, the killer wanted them together, wanted the family unit intact, at least for a while. But why? And here's another thing. The bodies were found wedged into a rock crevice. Belinda, David, and Melissa were stuffed into a small cave. Richard was tied to a tree nearby. This wasn't a shallow grave dug in a panic. This was deliberate. Someone took the time to hide them, to conceal them in a way that would make discovery difficult. But if you're going to all that effort, why leave the campsite so pristine? Why not burn it, scatter the gear, make it look like the family packed up and left? The killer was meticulous about hiding the bodies, but careless about the campsite. That inconsistency is baffling. Fourth, the dog Droopy. The Basset Hound survived. The dog was found the next day, miles away, at the general store, unharmed, healthy, just wandering. Why spare the dog? If you're willing to kill an infant, why draw the line at a Basset Hound? It's not like the dog could testify. It's not a threat. So why let it live? And how did the dog get to the store? Did it follow the family for part of the journey and then run when things went bad? Did the killer release it? Did it escape on its own? The dog is a loose thread that doesn't fit anywhere. It's one more piece of this puzzle that refuses to click into place. Over the years, investigators have looked at various suspects. The name that comes up most often is Dwayne Lee Little, a convicted killer who was known to be in the area around that time. Little had a history of violence, particularly against women. In 1977, he was convicted of murdering a woman named Orla Faye Phipps in a nearby county. But here's the problem. Little's MO was targeting lone women. He didn't abduct families. He didn't take children. The leap from killing a solitary woman to abducting and executing an entire family, including a baby, is massive. It's a different kind of crime, a different kind of psychology. Could Little have done it? Maybe. He's never been charged. He's never confessed. And without concrete evidence, the case remains officially unsolved. On April 12, 1975, 7 months after they vanished, the Cowden family was found together in death. Richard tied to a tree, Belinda, David, and baby Melissa hidden in a rocky crevice. The winter had been harsh, the elements had done their work, but even in skeletal form, the horror of what happened to them was clear. Someone marched this family into the wilderness and executed them. Someone controlled them so completely that they left their campsite without disturbing a carton of milk. Someone moved them 7 miles through brutal terrain, infant in tow, and then methodically killed them one by one. And then that person walked away, vanished into the same woods that swallowed the Cowdens. No arrest, no justice, just silence. The Copper General Store where Richard bought that quart of milk, it's still there, still serving the occasional camper or hiker passing through. The campsite near Carberry Creek, people still use it. Life goes on. But the image of that campsite on September 1st, 1974, haunts everyone who studies this case. The milk carton sitting in the sun, the wash basin filled with water, the valuables left behind. A family frozen in the middle of an ordinary day and then erased. The Siskiyou Mountains are beautiful. They're quiet. They're dotted with campgrounds where families still go to escape the noise of modern life. But somewhere in those woods, there's a truth buried as deep as the Cowden family once was. And after 50 years, the mountains aren't talking. The milk never spilled. The family never came home. And the killer never answered for what they did. October 2nd, 1999, Poudre Canyon, Colorado. It's one of those perfect autumn days in the Rockies, the kind where the aspens are turning gold, the air is crisp but not cold, and the sky is so blue it almost hurts to look at. The kind of day that makes you understand why people move to Colorado in the first place. The Big South Trail winds along the Cache La Poudre River in the Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest. It's a popular spot, not some backcountry death trap. Families hike here. There are lodges, resorts, fishing spots. On this particular Saturday, the trail is busier than usual because there's a group outing happening, the Christian Singles Network. About a dozen adults, all members of this Christian social group, have gathered for a day hike. It's a community event, safe, supervised, the kind of wholesome weekend activity where nothing bad is supposed to happen. Among the group is Alan Atadero and his 2 kids. Alan is recently separated from his wife, and he's brought his 3-year-old son Jared and his 6-year-old daughter Jocelyn on this trip. It's meant to be a bonding experience, a chance to get the kids outdoors, let them burn off some energy, maybe tire them out before the drive home. Jared Atadero is 3 years old. Let me paint the picture for you. He's wearing a brown polar fleece pullover, blue pants, and, this detail matters, high-top Tarzan sneakers. Disney-branded, slip-on style, the kind of shoes a toddler can get on and off by himself. He's energetic, curious, and trusting. He's at that age where the world is still magical, where adults are safe, where a hike in the woods is an adventure, not a threat. The trail itself follows the river. It's not steep. It's not technical. You don't need climbing gear or backcountry experience. It's a straightforward, well-maintained path through ponderosa pine and Douglas fir. The kind of hike where you can chat with friends, take photos, and keep an eye on the kids without too much effort. Except, here's the thing about group hikes. Responsibility gets diffused. The faster walkers pull ahead, the slower walkers lag behind, and somewhere in the middle, a 3-year-old can slip through the cracks. The group sets off mid-morning. Jared is full of energy, running back and forth between the adults. He's that kid, the one who can't just walk. He has to explore, dart ahead, double back. It's exhausting to watch, but it's also kind of endearing. He's excited. At some point, the group naturally splits. The faster hikers, younger, fitter, move ahead. The slower group, including Alan and Jocelyn, trails behind. Jared, being 3, doesn't understand the concept of stay with your group. He sees the fast hikers ahead and decides he wants to catch up. He runs. Now, here's where we get the last confirmed sighting. Jared encounters 2 fishermen on the trail. They're casting lines into the river, minding their own business, when this little kid in a brown fleece comes bounding up to them. And Jared asks them a question, a simple, innocent question that in hindsight feels almost prophetic. Are there bears in the woods? The fishermen smile. They tell him, no, don't worry. There aren't any bears around here. It's safe. Jared seems satisfied with this answer. He's reassured. The fishermen watch him continue up the trail, assuming, quite reasonably, that his parents are just around the bend. They figure he's part of a family group, that adults are nearby. They don't think twice about it. But when the main Christian singles group catches up minutes later, Jared isn't there. The fishermen mention seeing a little boy in a brown fleece. The adults realize with creeping horror, that was Jared. And now, he's gone. They call his name, no response. They spread out along the trail, checking behind trees, down by the river, up the slope. Nothing. Within minutes, the panic sets in. Within an hour, search and rescue is notified. By nightfall, helicopters are sweeping the canyon with spotlights. The search becomes massive. Helicopters equipped with infrared cameras, tracking dogs, hundreds of volunteers combing every inch of the riverbank, the forest floor, the rock formations. They search for days, then weeks. The Poudre River is dammed and drained in sections, searched for a small body caught in the current. They find nothing. No scent trail, no footprints, no scraps of brown fleece snagged on branches, no Tarzan sneakers lodged between rocks. It's as if Jared Atadero evaporated. The case goes cold. Months pass, then years. Alan Atadero never stops searching. He returns to the trail over and over, walking the same path his son disappeared from, hoping for some sign, some clue. But the forest gives him nothing. And then, in June 2003, 4 years after Jared vanished, Two hikers are bushwhacking off-trail, miles from where the search had focused. They're climbing through rough, steep terrain when they spot something that doesn't belong: clothing and bones. It's Jared. Okay, let's stop and look at what they found, because this is where the case goes from tragic to deeply fundamentally strange. Jared's remains were discovered approximately 550 feet vertically above the trail. Not 550 feet down the trail, not 550 feet along the riverbank, 550 feet up a steep rocky slope that requires scrambling, using your hands, navigating loose scree and boulders. There's no trail there. It's not a place a casual hiker would go. It's certainly not a place a 3-year-old would wander. Let me be very clear about what we're talking about. A 3-year-old child does not have the physical capability to climb 550 vertical feet up a rocky mountainside. It's not a matter of determination or fear giving him superhuman strength. It's basic physiology. Toddlers have short legs. Their coordination is still developing. They get tired fast. They don't have the grip strength or the problem-solving skills to navigate technical terrain. And yet, there he was. Or rather, there his remains were. First, the clothing. Now, let's talk about what was recovered, because this is where things get even stranger. Jared's brown polar fleece pullover was found, but it was inside out. Think about that. How does a fleece jacket end up inside out? You'd have to pull it over someone's head in a specific way, essentially yanking it off by the hem. It's the kind of thing that happens when you're undressing a toddler who's squirming, or when something is dragging or pulling at clothing. But here's the detail that keeps people awake at night: his shoes. Jared's high-top Tarzan sneakers were found at the site, and according to multiple sources who saw them, including his father, Alan, they looked pristine, brand new. After 4 Colorado winters, after snow, rain, sun, freeze-thaw cycles, after 4 years of being exposed to the elements at high altitude, shoes don't do that, fabric doesn't do that, even synthetic materials degrade. UV radiation from the sun breaks down polymers, water seeps in, freezes, expands, rodents chew on things, insects burrow, mold grows. After 4 years sitting on a mountainside, shoes should be faded, cracked, maybe falling apart entirely. But Jared's shoes looked like they'd just been taken out of the box. Now, some people have suggested that the location, tucked under rocks protected from the elements, might explain the preservation. Maybe. But protected from the elements doesn't explain why there was no dirt, no staining, no weathering at all. It doesn't explain why they looked new. And there's another detail. His pants were found, but one pant leg was missing. Just gone. Not torn off in a way that suggested animal predation. Just absent. Second, the mountain lion theory. The official explanation, the one that gets repeated in news articles and police reports, is that Jared was killed by a mountain lion. And look, mountain lions are real. They live in Colorado. They occasionally attack humans, though it's rare. So on the surface, it's not an unreasonable theory. But let's examine it. Mountain lions are ambush predators. They typically attack from behind, going for the neck or head to deliver a killing bite. They then drag their prey to a secluded spot to feed. They cache the body, cover it with leaves and debris, and return to it over several days. If a mountain lion killed Jared on the trail, you'd expect to find evidence at the attack site: blood, disturbed soil, maybe scraps of clothing. But searchers found nothing at the location where Jared was last seen. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no disturbance. Okay, so maybe the attack happened elsewhere. Maybe the cat grabbed him and dragged him up the slope. But here's the problem. Mountain lions don't climb 550 vertical feet with a 40-pound toddler in their mouth. They drag prey to the nearest cover, usually downhill because gravity helps. Uphill, against gravity, through technical terrain, that doesn't align with predator behavior. And even if we accept that a mountain lion somehow hauled Jared up that slope, we're left with the condition of the clothing and shoes. Mountain lions shred things, their claws tear fabric, their teeth puncture and rip. But the fleece, while inside out, wasn't shredded. The shoes were intact. There were no claw marks reported on the bones. The puzzle pieces don't fit. Third, the scream. There's one more detail that haunts this case. Shortly after Jared was last seen, his sister Josellen and some of the other adults heard a scream. But they didn't describe it as a scream of terror. They said it sounded playful, like a child laughing or being chased in a game of tag. It sounded like someone was playing with him. What do you do with that? If Jared was attacked by a mountain lion, the scream would be different. It would be terror, pain, but a playful scream? That suggests Jared didn't feel threatened. That suggests he thought whatever was happening was a game. Was someone, or something, luring him, playing with him? Or is the description of the scream just a trauma response, the brain's way of reframing a horrible sound into something less awful? Fourth, the physics of the climb. Let me come back to the location one more time, because I don't think I can overstate how impossible this is. 550 feet of vertical gain, rough, rocky terrain, no trail, no handholds designed for climbing, just loose scree, boulders, and steep slopes where one wrong step sends you sliding back down. Professional search and rescue teams didn't search that area initially because it was deemed too difficult for a toddler to access. They focused on the river, the trail, the surrounding forest, places a 3-year-old could realistically reach. They never imagined he'd be up on that ridge. So how did he get there? Option 1. He climbed, but we've already established that's physically implausible for a 3-year-old. Option 2. He was carried. By a person? Then we're talking about abduction and murder, but there's no evidence of foul play beyond the strange positioning of the body. And why would someone carry a toddler 550 feet up a mountain? What's the motive? Option 3. He was carried by an animal. A large predator could theoretically drag prey uphill, but as we've discussed, the behavior doesn't match, and the condition of the clothing doesn't support it. Option 4. Something else, something we don't have a category for. Jared Atadero asked 2 fishermen if there were bears in the woods. They told him no. They told him he was safe. And maybe in that moment, he felt safe. Maybe he walked further up the trail with that reassurance, not knowing that the forest held something far stranger than bears. 4 years later, hikers found him on top of the world, perched on a ridge where he had no business being. His shoes looked brand new, his jacket was inside out, and the questions piled up like stones. How did he climb that high? Why did his shoes look pristine after 4 Colorado winters? What pulled him, or carried him, up that impossible slope? The official answer is mountain lion. Predation, a tragic accident. And maybe that's true. Maybe there's a rational explanation we just haven't pieced together yet. Maybe the preservation of the shoes was a fluke of microclimate. Maybe the climb wasn't as impossible as it seems. But Alan Atadero, Jared's father, doesn't buy it. He spent years studying the evidence, walking the terrain, talking to experts, and he keeps coming back to the same conclusion. Something doesn't add up. The pieces don't fit. The story we've been told doesn't match the physical evidence. The Poudre Canyon is still there. The Big South Trail is still open. Families still hike it. Fishermen still cast lines into the river. And the aspens still turn gold every October. It's beautiful. It's safe. Until it isn't. Jared Atadero was 3 years old. He asked about bears and was told there was nothing to fear. But whatever found him that day, whatever carried him 550 feet up a sheer rock face and left his shoes looking like new, it wasn't a bear. It wasn't a mountain lion. It was something else. And 25 years later, we still don't know what. Jared went up. And the only question that matters is, how? July 17th, 1981, Yosemite National Park. But we're not talking about the crowded valley floor with its shuttle buses and souvenir shops. We're talking about the High Sierra, the granite cathedral in the sky. Sunrise High Sierra Camp sits at about 9,400 feet elevation, tucked into the backcountry where the air is thin and the views stretch forever. This isn't a place you drive to. You hike in or you ride a mule. It's remote, but it's not wild. It's managed. There are cabins, a dining tent, guides. It's a tourist operation, expensive, curated, safe. The landscape up here is something else. Open meadows dotted with wildflowers, massive granite domes rising like cathedrals, crystal clear lakes reflecting the sky, lodgepole pines scattered across the slopes. It's the kind of place that ends up on postcards and screensavers, the kind of place that makes you believe in something bigger than yourself. Beautiful, serene, peaceful. And it was a perfect day. Mid-July. Clear blue sky. Temperatures in the 60s during the day, though it would drop fast after sunset, down into the 40s. That's high altitude for you. The sun is intense at 9,400 feet, but the shade is cold. The air is so dry your lips crack. And sound? Sound carries forever up here. There's no ambient noise to muffle it. No traffic, no machinery, just wind and maybe the occasional bird. Stacey Ann Aris was 14 years old. She was there with her father as part of a guided mule pack trip. Think of it like a backcountry resort experience. Ride mules into the wilderness, stay in rustic cabins, eat meals prepared by the staff, hike during the day, and sleep under more stars than you've ever seen in your life. It's the kind of trip that costs money, the kind of trip families plan for, safe, supervised. Nothing bad is supposed to happen. Stacey was an adventurous kid, not reckless but curious. She wanted to see things, experience things, and she had a camera, an Olympus with a colorful strap. She loved photography. She wanted to capture the beauty of the Sierra. That morning, before the hike, she'd changed out of her flip-flops and into proper hiking boots, gray boots with Vibram soles. Her father insisted, "Good call, Dad. The terrain up here is rocky, uneven. You need real footwear." She was wearing a white jersey blouse with lace, an off-white windbreaker, and shorts with vertical maroon and white stripes. Distinctive, easy to spot. She had a gold ankle bracelet. She wore a retainer. She was a normal teenage girl on a normal family trip in one of the most beautiful places on Earth. And then she walked around a cluster of trees and was never seen again. The group arrives at Sunrise High Sierra Camp around mid-afternoon. Everyone's tired but exhilarated. That good kind of tired where your legs are sore, but your heart is full. The mules are unsaddled, the gear is unloaded, and people start settling into their cabins. Stacey doesn't want to rest. She wants to explore. There's a lake nearby, close, maybe a quarter-mile away, and she wants to go photograph it. The light is perfect. Golden hour is approaching. The water will be like glass. It's the kind of opportunity a photographer doesn't pass up. Her father is tired. He's done for the day. But there's an elderly man in their group, a 77-year-old, who offers to accompany Stacey. It's a nice gesture. The old man figures he'll walk partway with her, maybe sit on a rock and enjoy the view while she goes ahead to take her pictures. It's safe. It's close. What could go wrong? So off they go, Stacey and the old man walking together. The terrain is open here, rocky but not steep. You can see for a long way. They're not bushwhacking through dense forest. This is high Sierra terrain, scattered trees, granite slabs, meadows, visual clarity. They walk for a bit. The old man gets tired. He's 77. Remember? He finds a rock to sit on, comfortable, with a view. He tells Stacey to go ahead. He'll wait here. She's just going a little further, to the ridge, to get a better angle for her photos. Stacey walks ahead. The old man watches her. She's wearing those maroon and white striped shorts, easy to track. He sees her move toward a small cluster of trees, maybe a rocky outcrop. She's heading toward the vantage point she wants. She rounds the trees, and that's it. That's the last time anyone sees Stacey Aris. The old man sits there, waiting. He's relaxed, enjoying the mountain air. Minutes pass, then more minutes. He starts to wonder, where is she? How long does it take to snap a few photos? He calls her name. No response. He gets up, walks to where he last saw her. She's not there. He looks around the trees, over the ridge. Nothing. Now he's worried. He heads back to the camp, faster than a 77-year-old should probably move at altitude. He tells the guides. They tell Stacey's father. Within an hour, people are searching. Within hours, it's a full-scale operation. The search becomes massive. Helicopters, Chinooks, those big twin-rotor beasts flying over the high country, tracking dogs, over 100 searchers on foot combing every inch of terrain, mountain rescue teams rappelling down cliffs, checking crevices. The search lasts 14 days. They cover miles and miles of wilderness. They find one thing, one single solitary item, a lens cap, from Stacy's Olympus camera. It's sitting on the ground, not far from where the old man last saw her. Just the cap, no camera, no film canister, no strap, no body, no backpack, no maroon and white shorts, no gray Vibram-soled boots. Just a plastic lens cap sitting in the dirt like a calling card. And then, nothing. For over 40 years, nothing. Let's stop and really think about what happened here, because the more you examine the facts, the less sense they make. First, the proximity of the witness. Stacy Aris did not vanish in some remote, inaccessible corner of the wilderness. She vanished while being watched. The old man was sitting right there, 50, maybe 75 yards away. In the high Sierra at that elevation, sound carries like you wouldn't believe. There's no ambient noise to absorb it, no traffic, no wind through dense foliage, just open air and rock. If Stacy had fallen, slipped off a ledge, tumbled into a crevice, there would have been sound. Rocks sliding, a scream, a gasp, something. If a bear or mountain lion had grabbed her, she would have screamed. 14-year-olds don't go silently into predation. They fight, they yell, they make noise. But the old man heard nothing. Dead silence. She walked around a cluster of trees and that was it. No scream, no rock sliding, no commotion, just absence. How does that happen? How does a person in maroon and white striped shorts, high visibility clothing, vanish in open terrain while someone is watching from 50 yards away? Second, the terrain isn't that dangerous. Now, I'm not saying the High Sierra is a walk in the park. There are cliffs, there are crevices. People fall and die in Yosemite every year. But the area around Sunrise High Sierra Camp isn't Yosemite Valley with its sheer 3,000-foot drops. It's high country, rolling granite, meadows. Yes, there are drops, but they're not everywhere. And the searchers knew this terrain. They checked every cliff, every crevice, every boulder field. Nothing. If Stacy had fallen, her body would have been found. The search was exhaustive. Helicopters with infrared cameras, dogs trained to find human remains, mountain rescue teams who specialize in recovering bodies from impossible places, and they found nothing. No body, no bones, no clothing, just a lens cap. Third, the lens cap. Let's talk about that lens cap, because it's haunting in its simplicity. A lens cap is a small, easily lost item. You take it off, you set it down, you forget about it. But Stacy's lens cap was found intentionally placed, not lost in the brush, not blown by wind, but sitting on the ground in a way that suggests it was removed deliberately. What does that tell us? It tells us Stacy stopped. She prepared to take a photograph. She removed the lens cap, probably set it down or put it in her pocket, and then... What? She lifted the camera to her eye. She framed her shot. And then? The lens cap is the last physical trace of her existence. It's the timestamp. It marks the exact moment she crossed from being to not being. And that's what makes it so eerie. It's not evidence of a struggle. It's not evidence of an accident. It's evidence of an interruption. She was doing something completely normal, taking a picture, and then she ceased to exist. No camera, no body, just the cap. It feels less like a clue and more like a taunt, like the wilderness saying, "This is all you get." Fourth, the dogs found nothing. This is crucial. Tracking dogs are incredibly effective in wilderness searches. They can pick up scent trails days after a person passes through an area. But in Stacy's case, the dogs couldn't establish a trail. Why? Some reports suggest the conditions were dry, high-altitude summer, dusty ground. Scent doesn't adhere well to dry dust, but even in less than ideal conditions, dogs usually pick up something, a direction, a weak trail, anything. But in Stacy's case, nothing. It's as if her scent just stopped, right where the lens cap was found, as if she walked to that spot and then was lifted into the air. Fifth, the classified file. Now, this is where things get truly strange, and frankly, disturbing. Decades after Stacy's disappearance, researchers and journalists have tried to obtain the full case file from the National Park Service through Freedom of Information Act requests. This is standard practice for cold cases. Files get released, researchers review them, sometimes new leads emerge. But the National Park Service has repeatedly denied full access to Stacey Arris's file. They've released some documents, heavily redacted with entire pages blacked out, but the complete file, denied. The reason given? The case is still an active investigation, and releasing the file could compromise the integrity of that investigation. Let's think about that for a second. It's been over 40 years, 4 decades. Stacey Arris would be in her mid-50s now if she were alive. The old man who saw her last? Long dead. Most of the original searchers retired or deceased. The investigation, by any reasonable measure, is cold, not active, cold. So why the secrecy? What is in that file that the National Park Service doesn't want the public to see? Here are the possibilities. Option 1. There's information about a suspect. Maybe they know or strongly suspect someone was involved in Stacey's disappearance. Maybe there was evidence of foul play that was never made public. If that's the case, why hasn't anyone been charged in 40 years? Option 2. There's information that would embarrass the Park Service. Maybe there were procedural failures during the search. Maybe evidence was mishandled. Maybe there were sightings or leads that weren't followed up on. Bureaucratic incompetence is plausible, but does that justify classifying a file for 4 decades? Option 3. There's something in that file that doesn't fit any known narrative. Something so strange, so outside the realm of normal investigative findings, that releasing it would open a door the Park Service doesn't want opened. I'm not saying it's aliens or interdimensional portals or whatever the internet wants to believe, but I am saying the secrecy is strange. And in a case already defined by strangeness, that secrecy becomes a red flag. Here's something else worth noting. The Sunrise Tenaya Lake area of Yosemite has a history of disappearances. Stacey Arris is not the only person to vanish in that region under bizarre circumstances. There's a cluster, a geographic concentration of missing persons cases that defies statistical expectation. Some researchers attribute this to the terrain, lots of cliffs, crevices, places to fall and never be found. But the High Sierra is vast. Why this specific area? Why the same handful of square miles over and over? I don't have an answer, but the pattern is there. Stacey Arris walked around a cluster of trees on a perfect summer day in one of the most beautiful places on Earth. She went to take a picture, to capture a moment of beauty and carry it home with her. Instead, she became a permanent part of the landscape. Not in the way we usually mean, buried, decomposed, returned to the earth, but in a different way. A way that feels more like absorption, like the mountain reached out and took her. The old man who watched her walk away carries that image forever. He sat on a rock, watching a girl in striped shorts round a tree, and then she was gone. No scream, no sound, just silence. The searchers combed every inch of that terrain. Helicopters, dogs, rappelling teams. They found a lens cap. That's it. One small plastic cap sitting in the dirt, marking the spot where a teenage girl ceased to exist. And the file? The National Park Service file that might contain answers, or at least more questions? It's locked away, classified, protected. After 40 years, they still won't let us see it. What are they hiding? What's in those pages that's so sensitive, so dangerous, that it can't be released even now when everyone involved is gone? Yosemite is one of the crown jewels of the American wilderness. Millions of people visit every year. They hike the trails, take the photos, sleep under the stars, and 99.9% of them go home safely. But that 0.1%, the ones who don't come back, they leave behind questions that echo through the granite and the silence. Stacey Arris wanted to photograph beauty. She walked 50 yards from an elderly witness in broad daylight on open terrain. And she vanished. The lens cap is all that's left. A small, plastic piece of a camera she never got to use. She went to capture the Sierra. Instead, the Sierra captured her. And 40 years later, it still hasn't given her back. The mountain keeps its secrets, and the government keeps its files. And somewhere in the overlap of those two silences, the truth about Stacey Arris waits. But we may never know it. July 2nd, 1938, Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado, 4th of July weekend. America is still pulling itself out of the Great Depression, but for a few days in early July, families are determined to forget their troubles and celebrate. The national parks are packed. People arrive in their Model A Fords, wearing wool coats and heavy boots, carrying wicker picnic baskets. It's a different era. Black and white photographs, hand-cranked cameras, a time when wilderness safety meant bringing a compass and trusting your instincts. Rocky Mountain National Park in 1938 is stunning, pristine, and deceptively dangerous. The peaks rise above 14,000 feet. The rivers are ice-cold, fed by snowmelt. The terrain is a mix of alpine meadows, dense pine forests, and jagged granite ridges that look like the spine of a sleeping dragon. It's beautiful in a way that makes you feel small, insignificant, temporary. The Baleharts family from Pueblo, Colorado, has driven up for the holiday weekend. It's a big group: parents, extended family, kids. They're camping near the Roaring River, a fast-moving mountain stream that cuts through the valley. The name is accurate. It roars. The sound of rushing water is constant, a white noise that drowns out conversation unless you raise your voice. Alfred Edwin Beilhartz is 4 years old, not quite 5. He's small for his age, quiet, the youngest of the group, the kind of kid who gets overlooked in a crowd of louder, older children. But he's there, excited to be camping, eager to explore. His family is watching him, or at least they think they are. July the 2nd is a Saturday. The weather's perfect, clear skies, warm sun, the kind of day that makes you believe nothing bad can happen. The family decides to take a hike along the Roaring River Trail. It's not a difficult hike. It's popular with families. The path follows the river upstream, winding through pine trees and over rocky outcrops. The elevation gain is moderate. Kids do this hike all the time. At around 8 a.m. they set out. The Beilhartz family is moving as a loose group. The adults are chatting, keeping an eye on the kids. The older children are running ahead, exploring, poking at things with sticks. Alfred is bringing up the rear. He's little. His legs are shorter. He has to work harder to keep up. They're hiking along the river, water rushing to their left, trees and rocks to their right. The trail isn't steep here, but it's uneven. You have to watch your step. The sound of the river is loud, constant, hypnotic. Alfred's father looks back. He sees his son, maybe 20 or 30 feet behind. Alfred is walking, focused on his feet, trying to navigate the rocky trail. Everything is fine. Dad turns back around, keeps walking. A minute passes, maybe 2. He looks back again. Alfred is gone. Not out of sight around a bend, gone. Not wandered a few feet off the trail, gone. Just gone. Vanished. In the span of a minute or 2, a 4-year-old boy has disappeared from a hiking trail in broad daylight while surrounded by family. The panic is immediate. Dad starts yelling Alfred's name. The rest of the family doubles back, spreading out along the trail. They check the river. Maybe he slipped and fell in, but there's no splash, no sign of disturbance. The water is fast, cold, and violent. If a child had fallen in, there would be evidence, thrashing, clothing snagged on rocks, something. They search the nearby trees, the rocks, the bushes, nothing. Within an hour, park rangers are notified. By afternoon, it's a full-scale search operation. The response is massive. Over 150 searchers mobilize, park rangers, members of the Civilian Conservation Corps, local volunteers. They bring bloodhounds. This is 1938, so there are no helicopters, no infrared cameras, no drones. Just boots on the ground and dogs. The bloodhounds are crucial. They're brought to the spot where Alfred was last seen. The dogs pick up his scent and start tracking. They head upstream, away from the family, following the river. The handlers are hopeful. This is a clear trail. The dogs are confident. And then, about 500 feet upstream, maybe half a mile depending on which account you read, the scent just stops. Dead. The dogs circle, sniff, search. Nothing. It's as if Alfred Beilhartz walked to that spot and was lifted into the air. Now, here's where it gets truly strange. Because while the search is happening on the ground, something else is unfolding on the mountain. It's now July 3rd, 1938. The next day. The search for Alfred has been going for over 24 hours. Hundreds of people are combing the valley floor, the riverbanks, the forests. The assumption is that Alfred either drowned in the river or wandered into the woods and succumbed to exposure during the cold mountain night. But then a report comes in that changes everything. Two hikers are up on a prominent rock formation known as the Devil's Nest near the summit of Mount Chapin. Let me give you some context here, because the geography is absolutely critical to understanding why this sighting is so impossible. The Devil's Nest sits at approximately 11,500 feet elevation. The spot where Alfred vanished, along the Roaring River Trail, is around 8,500 feet elevation. That's a difference of 3,000 vertical feet. And the horizontal distance? Roughly 6 miles as the crow flies. But Alfred isn't a crow. A human, especially a 4-year-old human, would have to navigate steep, rocky, off-trail terrain, loose scree, boulders, dense forest, creek crossings. It's the kind of terrain that requires scrambling on all fours in places. So the hikers are up on this ridge, taking in the view, and they see something that stops them cold. A small boy. He's standing on a rock outcrop, silhouetted against the sky. He's alone. No adults, no camping gear, just a little boy, up on one of the most remote, inaccessible ridges in the park. They wave to him, try to get his attention. Maybe they're thinking, is that the missing kid? Should we go get him? But before they can make a decision, the boy does something strange. He doesn't wave back. He doesn't call out for help. Instead, he jerks backward, as if pulled or startled, and disappears into the rocks, vanishes behind a boulder or into a crevice. The hikers try to relocate him, scanning the ridgeline. Nothing. He's gone. They report this to authorities. Search teams are dispatched to the Devil's Nest. They scour the area. They check every crevice, every cave, every boulder field. They find nothing. No footprints, no boy, no evidence anyone had been there at all. Now, let's stop and do the math. Let's really think about what this sighting implies. Alfred Beilhartz disappeared around 8:00 a.m. on July 2nd. The sighting on the Devil's Nest happened on July 3rd, let's say around 1 p.m. based on typical hiking schedules. That gives us roughly 29 hours. In those 29 hours, a 4-year-old boy would have had to 1. Survive the night. Mountain temperatures in July at 8,500 feet drop into the 40s or lower. Alfred was wearing typical 1930s kids' clothes, probably a cotton shirt, pants, maybe a light jacket, not technical gear. Hypothermia would have been a serious risk. 2. Navigate 6 miles of off-trail terrain, not a maintained path, not a gentle slope, rugged, rocky, unforgiving wilderness. An adult hiker in good shape might cover that distance in 4 or 5 hours. A 4-year-old, it would take all day if it's even possible. 3. Climb 3,000 vertical feet. This is the kicker. That's not a gentle uphill walk. That's a mountaineering ascent. It requires sustained effort, route finding, and physical endurance. Professional alpinists would describe that as a serious vertical gain. A toddler with short legs, no training, no equipment. It's not just unlikely, it's physiologically impossible. Olympic athletes would struggle to cover that distance and elevation gain in 29 hours. A 4-year-old child? There's simply no way. The human body, especially a small, undeveloped one, doesn't work like that. Kids get tired, they get hungry, they get scared. They don't spontaneously develop superhuman endurance and navigational skills. So if the boy on the Devil's Nest was Alfred Beilhartz, and the timing, the description, the location all suggest it could have been, how did he get up there? First, the behavior. Let's talk about the boy's behavior because it's deeply unsettling. The hikers wave to him. This is important. If you're a lost 4-year-old who's been wandering the mountains for a day and a night and you see adults, what do? You run toward them, you cry, you call for help, you don't hide. But this boy didn't do any of that. He jerked backward and disappeared. It's almost as if he was afraid of the hikers, or as if something or someone pulled him back, forced him to retreat. Why would a lost child hide from rescuers? Unless he didn't perceive himself as lost, unless he was with someone, or unless he'd been conditioned to fear strangers. Or, and this is the darkest possibility, unless the boy on the ridge wasn't Alfred at all, but something else that looked like him from a distance. Second, the river theory versus the sighting. The official theory, the one that gets repeated in case files and news reports, is that Alfred drowned in the roaring river. The logic goes like this: he wandered too close to the water, slipped, fell in, and was swept downstream. The body was carried into deep pools or wedged under rocks, making recovery impossible. It's plausible. The river is fast, cold, and dangerous. Kids drown. It happens. But the bloodhounds tracked Alfred upstream, not downstream. And they tracked him for 500 feet before the scent stopped. If he'd fallen into the river, the dogs wouldn't have followed a scent trail upstream. They'd have lost the trail at the point of entry. And then there's the sighting. If Alfred drowned on July 2nd, who was the boy on the Devil's Nest on July 3rd? Third, the bandage and the cabin. There's one more wrinkle to this case. Years later, accounts vary on exactly when, a bandage was found in an abandoned cabin in the area. Alfred had been wearing a bandage on the day he disappeared. The discovery sparked renewed interest in the case. Could he have been taken to the cabin? Was he held there? But the cabin lid went nowhere. The bandage couldn't be definitively linked to Alfred. It might have belonged to any number of hikers or campers over the years. It's a tantalizing clue that ultimately tells us nothing. The sighting, though. The sighting is the thing that won't go away. Fourth, the hoax ransom. Note 5 months after Alfred's disappearance, his family received a ransom note demanding $500. Police investigated and determined it was a hoax, probably some opportunistic creep trying to exploit a grieving family. But the note added another layer of unease to the case. Someone out there was thinking about Alfred Beilhartz, thinking about what might have happened to him, and they thought abduction was plausible enough to fake a ransom demand. The search for Alfred Beilhartz lasted weeks. They dammed the river, diverted the water, searched the pools and channels. They combed the forests, the ridges, the valleys. They found nothing. No body, no clothing, no shoes. The mountains swallowed him whole and never gave him back. But the searchers were haunted by the sighting on the Devil's Nest. They couldn't shake it. A boy, alone, on a ridge so high and remote that even experienced hikers struggled to reach it. A boy who hid from the people trying to save him. A boy who jerked backward and vanished into the rocks. Was it Alfred? And if it was, how did he get up there? How does a 4-year-old child climb 3,000 vertical feet and traverse 6 miles of wilderness in one night? The human mind wants answers. It wants logic. It wants a story that makes sense. Drowned in the river. Okay, tragic, but we understand it. Wandered off and succumbed to exposure. Heartbreaking, but within the realm of normal human experience. But a boy on a mountaintop, 3,000 feet above where he vanished? A boy who hides from rescuers? That doesn't fit. That breaks the rules. And when the rules break, we're left with questions that have no comfortable answers. Did someone take him, carry him up the mountain? But why? And how did they evade the massive search operation? Did something take him? Something non-human? A predator capable of climbing vertical terrain while carrying a child? But what kind of predator behaves like that? Or was the sighting a mistake? A case of pareidolia? The human brain's tendency to see patterns and faces where none exist. Maybe the hikers saw a rock formation, or a young deer, or shadows playing tricks in the thin mountain air, and their minds, primed by the search, turned it into a boy. But they were adamant. They saw a boy, a small boy, standing on the Devil's Nest. And then, he was gone. Alfred Beilhartz vanished on a bright summer morning in 1938. His family never found him. The searchers never found him. The mountain never gave him back. But for one brief moment, on a ridge so high it touches the sky, someone, or something, might have seen him. Alone, afraid, or maybe not afraid at all, maybe content, maybe already somewhere else. The Devil's Nest still stands. Hikers still climb it, taking photos, marveling at the view. And sometimes, when the wind is right and the light plays tricks, you can almost see him. A small figure on the rocks, watching, waiting. But when you look again, he's gone. November 1928. The Colorado River, carving its way through the Grand Canyon. If you've never seen the Grand Canyon in person, pictures don't do it justice. It's not just big, it's incomprehensible. A mile deep, 10 miles wide in places, layers of rock stretching back 2 billion years, and at the bottom, threading through it all, is the Colorado River. Cold, fast, and utterly indifferent to human life. In 1928, running the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon isn't a tourist activity. There are no guided rafting tours, no safety briefings, no rescue helicopters on standby. It's one of the last true frontiers in America, a place where you're genuinely on your own. No radios, no cell phones, no GPS, just you, the river, and 200 miles of the most hostile, beautiful terrain on Earth. This is the Roaring Twenties, the age of Lindbergh, Earhart, adventurers chasing fame and glory. Everyone wants to be the first to do something. Fly across the Atlantic, climb Everest, run the Colorado River. Glenn and Bessie Hyde want to be part of that story. Glenn Rollin Hyde is 29 years old. He's an experienced outdoorsman, a farmer from Idaho who's run rivers before. The Snake, the Salmon. He knows boats. He knows water. He's confident, maybe too confident. His dream is to set a speed record running the Grand Canyon, and he's built a boat specifically for that purpose. A 20-foot wooden sweep scow. Now, let's talk about that boat for a second, because it's important. A sweep scow is basically a flat-bottomed raft with massive oars, sweeps, extending from the bow and stern. You don't row it like a normal boat. You steer it by pivoting against the current. It's a design borrowed from calmer rivers in Idaho, where Glenn learned to boat. But the Colorado River isn't calm. It's violent, technical, and in November, it's freezing. Bessie Louise Haley is 22 years old. She's Glenn's new wife. They've been married less than a year. And here's the thing. Bessie is not an outdoors woman. She's an art student. She's from West Virginia. She's never run a river before. But she wants to be famous. She wants to be the first woman to successfully navigate the entire length of the Grand Canyon. If she can do this, her name will be in the history books alongside all the great explorers. So in October 1928, Glenn and Bessie launch from Green River, Utah, in their homemade wooden scow. No life jackets. Glenn refuses to carry them, calling them unnecessary. No backup plan. Just 2 honeymooners, a wooden boat, and 600 miles of river ahead of them. The journey starts well enough. Glenn and Bessie make stops along the way, documenting their progress. On November 18th, they reach Hermit Rapid, about 95 miles into the canyon. They're spotted by Emery Kolb, a legendary river guide and photographer who lives at the South Rim. The Kolb brothers, Emery and Ellsworth, are famous for their daring river expeditions and their studio perched on the canyon rim. Emery talks to Glenn and Bessie. He takes their photograph, the last confirmed image of them alive. In the photo, they look tired, Bessie especially. There are reports, though the details are murky, that she's anxious, maybe even frightened. Some accounts suggest she wants to hike out, to abandon the trip. Glenn, however, is determined. They're close. They're making good time. Just a little further. Emery Kolb warns them. He knows the river. He knows what's coming. Some of the most dangerous rapids in the canyon, including the notorious lava falls. He offers to let them stay, rest, reconsider. Glenn declines. They push off into the current. Emery watches them disappear downstream. That's the last time anyone sees Glenn and Bessie Hyde alive. When they don't arrive at their expected endpoint, concern grows. Glenn's father, Rollin Hyde, organizes a search. On December 19th, over a month after they were last seen, a search plane flying over the canyon spots something. A boat drifting in a calm eddy near River Mile 237. It's their scow. Upright, intact, just floating there like a ghost. Searchers hike down to the river. It's a brutal descent, thousands of feet down steep, rocky trails. When they finally reach the boat, what they find is deeply unsettling. The scow is in perfect condition. No damage, no holes, no signs of a violent wreck. The supplies are neatly stowed: food, camping gear, cooking equipment. Bessie's diary is tucked safely inside, chronicling their journey day by day. The last entry is dated November 30th, placing them near Diamond Creek. Glenn's pistol's in the boat. Their camera is there, still loaded with film. But Glenn and Bessie? Gone. Vanished. No bodies, no footprints on the shore, no signs of struggle, no explanation. The boat, fully loaded and seaworthy, is just drifting in circles, waiting for a crew that will never return. Okay, let's stop and really examine this, because the condition of that boat raises questions that have never been adequately answered. First, the boat was intact. If Glenn and Bessie hit a rapid, a big violent rapid like Lava Falls or 232-mile rapid, and were thrown from the boat, you'd expect to see damage. Rapids don't just toss you out gently. The boat gets slammed into rocks, it gets swamped with water, it flips, it breaks apart. That's what happens in whitewater accidents. But the hide scow was pristine, upright, dry. The supplies were still strapped in, the food was still packed. It wasn't the wreckage of a disaster, it was a boat in mid-journey, as if the crew had simply stepped off and walked away. How do you explain that? If they fell out, why didn't the boat capsize or get damaged? And if they didn't fall out, where did they go? Second, the lack of life jackets. Glenn Hyde refused to carry life jackets. He thought they were unnecessary, that they'd just get in the way. This decision haunts the case. In the cold November water of the Colorado River, survival without a life jacket is measured in minutes, not hours. Even if you're a strong swimmer, which Bessie wasn't, the cold saps your strength. Hypothermia sets in fast. You go under. So the theory goes, they hit a rapid, fell out, and drowned. The current carried their bodies downstream, wedging them under rocks or into deep pools where they'd never be found. But again, the boat. The boat should have been wrecked. And there's another problem. The scow was found in an eddy, a calm, swirling pool where the current slows. If the boat drifted there on its own, unmanned, how did it avoid every rock, every rapid, every hazard between Hermit Rapid and River Mile 237? That's over 100 miles of river. Unmanned boats don't navigate themselves through technical whitewater. They crash, they sink, they get stuck. Third, Bessie's state of mind. Here's where the psychology gets dark. By all accounts, Bessie was terrified by the end of the trip. The cold, the isolation, the relentless roar of the river. She wasn't an experienced outdoorswoman. She'd signed up for fame, for adventure, for a story to tell. But the reality of the Grand Canyon in November, freezing nights, brutal rapids, no escape route, was breaking her down. There are reports that she wanted out, that she begged Glenn to let her hike out at one of the side canyons, to abandon the trip. Glenn refused. He was so close to his speed record, he couldn't stop now. So the question becomes, did Bessie snap? Did they have a fight? Did she push him? Glenn was manning the sweeps, standing at the edge of the boat using the massive oars to steer. If Bessie came up behind him and shoved, he'd go straight into the freezing water. And without a life jacket, he's done. He's gone in seconds. And then Bessie is alone, on a boat she can't operate, drifting, terrified. She knows she can't navigate the remaining rapids. She knows she'll die if she stays on the river. So maybe she abandons the boat at the next calm stretch. Maybe she climbs out at Diamond Creek or Separation Canyon. Maybe she hikes out, tells no one, and disappears into a new life. Is it possible? Physically, yes. Psychologically? That's harder to say. Could a 22-year-old art student murder her husband and then hike out of one of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth? Could she keep that secret for the rest of her life? Maybe. Or maybe that's just a story we tell because the alternative, a random accident that leaves no evidence, is too unsatisfying. Now, here's where the case takes a turn into legend. Decades later, some accounts say the 1970s, a woman on a commercial Grand Canyon rafting trip pulls the guide aside. She's elderly, in her 70s or 80s. She tells him quietly, almost casually, "I'm Bessie Hyde. I killed him." And then she walks away. She never gives her real name. She's never identified. She vanishes back into her normal life, leaving the guide with a confession he can't verify and a story he'll tell for the rest of his life. Is it true? Was she really Bessie Hyde? Or was she just an old woman spinning a tall tale, getting a thrill from shocking a stranger? We don't know. We'll never know. But the confession fits the psychology. It fits the guilt. It fits the idea of an old woman near the end of her life, wanting to unburden herself of a secret she's carried for 50 years. Then there's another twist. In 1992, a famous river guide named Georgie Clark died. Georgie was a legend, one of the first women to run commercial rafting trips on the Colorado. She was tough, brash, mysterious about her past. After her death, rumors started circulating that Georgie was actually Bessie Hyde, that Bessie had hiked out of the canyon, changed her identity, and spent the rest of her life on the river under a new name. The evidence? A pistol was reportedly found in Georgie's belongings that matched the description of the one in the Hyde scow. There were whispers about a marriage license, about birth records that didn't add up. But forensic investigation debunked it. Georgie Clark's early life was well documented. She wasn't Bessie Hyde. The pistol, if it existed, was never definitively linked to the Hydes. It was a compelling story, but it didn't hold up. Still, the fact that people wanted to believe it, the fact that the rumor persisted, tells you something about the case. We want Bessie to have survived. We want her to have escaped. We want one of them to have walked out of that canyon alive. The most likely scenario, the one that fits the evidence, is simple and tragic. Glenn and Bessie hit a submerged rock or a hydraulic. The impact threw them both into the water. The scow, buoyant and sturdy, popped free and drifted downstream until it snagged in an eddy. Glenn and Bessie, without life jackets, drowned in the freezing water. Their bodies were swept into deep pools or wedged under rocks, never to be recovered. It's not dramatic. It's not mysterious. It's just a couple of people who underestimated the river and paid the ultimate price. But the condition of the boat, the pristine, untouched ghost ship drifting in calm water, invites speculation. It invites darker possibilities, and that's why the case endures. The Colorado River is 150 miles long. It carved the Grand Canyon over millions of years, cutting through rock, reshaping the landscape with patient, relentless force. It's older than us, stronger than us, and it doesn't care about human drama. Glenn and Bessie Hyde wanted to be famous. They wanted their names in the history books. And in a way, they got what they wanted. Their story is still told nearly a century later. Their faces still stare out from that last photograph, tired and determined, standing on the edge of something they didn't fully understand. But the river never gave them back. No bodies, no closure, just an empty boat drifting in circles, supplies neatly stowed, diary tucked safely inside. Did they die together, swept away in a moment of cold, violent water? Or did one of them survive? Did Bessie climb out of that canyon and walk into a new life, carrying a secret too terrible to share? The confession, "I'm Bessie Hyde. I killed him," haunts the case. It might be true, it might be fantasy, but it speaks to something we want to believe, that someone survived, that someone made it out, that the canyon didn't take everything. The Grand Canyon is beautiful, it's awe-inspiring, and it's utterly indifferent to whether you live or die. Glenn and Bessie learned that the hard way. Their boat still floats through history, a ghost ship on an endless river, crewed by shadows and questions, and somewhere in the depths of the Colorado or in the memory of an old woman who never gave her name, the truth waits. But the river isn't talking, and maybe it never will. January 1975, Crater Lake National Park, Oregon. If you've never been to Crater Lake in winter, let me paint the picture for you. It's not just cold, it's Arctic. The lake itself sits in the caldera of an ancient volcano, surrounded by cliffs that rise 1,000 feet straight up. In summer, it's one of the most photographed spots in America. Impossibly blue water, so clear you can see 100 feet down, reflecting the sky like a mirror. But in winter is a different beast entirely. By January, Crater Lake is buried. We're talking 10, 12, sometimes 15 feet of snow at the rim. The access road is closed. The visitor center is shuttered. The only people up there are rangers on snowmobiles and the occasional hardcore winter camper who knows what they're doing. The temperature hovers in the teens during the day, drops below zero at night. The wind is relentless, whipping across the rim, creating whiteout conditions in minutes. If you stop moving, if you stop generating heat, you freeze. It's that simple. And it's stunning. Hauntingly, dangerously beautiful. The kind of place that makes you feel small and fragile and temporary. The kind of place where nature doesn't care about your plans or your survival. The kind of place where people vanish. Charles McCullough was 19 years old, a photographer, an artist. He wanted to capture Crater Lake in winter, the raw, untouched beauty of it. He wasn't some inexperienced tourist fumbling with a rental car and flip-flops. He was there intentionally, with purpose. But intention and preparation are two different things. In mid-January 1975, Charles had a friend drop him off at the park. The plan was simple: hike, camp, take photos for a few days, and meet back at a designated spot for pickup. He had gear, a backpack, a camera, clothing. But here's the thing about winter camping. There's having gear, and there's having the right gear. And according to rangers who later reviewed the case, Charles was ill-prepared. What does that mean? It means he probably didn't have snowshoes. Without snowshoes, every step in deep powder is an ordeal. You sink to your waist, sometimes deeper. Moving 100 yards becomes an hour-long battle. Your heart rate spikes. You burn calories at an insane rate. You sweat, and then that sweat freezes against your skin. Hypothermia isn't a slow fade, it's a ticking clock. Charles McCullough set out into one of the harshest winter environments in the continental United States, and then, almost immediately, the mountain turned on him. Charles is dropped off. We don't know the exact date, reports vary, but it's sometime in mid-January 1975. He shoulders his pack, waves goodbye to his friend, and heads into the snow. The plan is to meet back in a few days. Routine, simple. And then a storm hits. Not just snow, a system. The kind of storm that shuts down entire regions. Visibility drops to nothing. The wind howls. Snow falls in thick, heavy curtains, accumulating at a rate of inches per hour. The rangers at Crater Lake, experienced in winter conditions, hunker down. They know better than to be out in this. Charles's pickup date comes and goes. He doesn't show. His friend waits, then contacts the park. Rangers initiate a search, but the conditions are brutal. They're fighting snow depths that exceed 100 inches, over 8 feet in some areas. The storm has erased any tracks, any scent, any sign of passage, and the park is vast, 183,000 acres of volcanic wilderness, much of it inaccessible even in summer. The search continues intermittently over the following weeks, but eventually, it's called off. The assumption is grim but logical. Charles McCullough got caught in the storm, succumbed to hypothermia, and was buried by snow. His body would likely remain hidden until spring thaw, maybe summer, when melting snow would reveal what the winter had taken. Except, that's not what happened. Spring comes, summer comes, no body. Hikers traverse the park, backpackers explore the backcountry, rangers patrol the trails. Nothing. Charles McCullough has vanished completely, as if the mountain swallowed him whole. And then, in 1976, a year and a half after he disappeared, 2 hikers are bushwhacking through a remote area near Bybee Creek, miles from any established trail. They're off the beaten path, scrambling over rocks and deadfall, when they find something. A backpack, weathered, half buried in undergrowth. They open it. Inside, they find identification. It belongs to Charles McCullough. Rangers are notified. A recovery team is sent to the location, and what they find defies easy explanation. Let's talk about what was discovered at that site, because the condition of the remains has generated decades of speculation, folklore, and genuine forensic puzzlement. First, the jeans. Charles McCullough's jeans were found at the scene, but they weren't just lying there. Discarded or torn off, they were unbuttoned. The belt was undone. And here's where it gets strange. Inside the legs of the jeans, the rangers found bones, specifically shin bones, the tibia and fibula, the long bones of the lower leg. Now, stop and think about that for a second. Picture a pair of jeans. Picture the bones of the lower leg. For those bones to be inside the pant legs, the body would have had to decompose in a very specific way. The soft tissue, muscle, skin, ligaments would have decayed or been consumed, leaving the bones to settle inside the clothing. But here's the logic gap. If the body decomposed to the point where the shin bones detached and settled into the pant legs, where are the rest of the bones? Where are the thigh bones? Where's the pelvis, the spine? Second, the socks and the missing boots. This is where the case crosses from strange into genuinely eerie. The toe bones, the phalanges, were found inside Charles's socks. The socks were still on the feet, or rather, still around the bones that used to be feet, but the boots? Gone, missing entirely. Let's break down why this is so bizarre. If a body decomposes naturally in the wilderness, scavengers, coyotes, bears, ravens, insects consume the soft tissue. But they tend to leave boots alone. Boots are laced, tied, secured. They're not appetizing. They're protective shells. You'd expect the boots to be one of the last things to remain intact, long after the flesh is gone. But in Charles's case, the boots vanished while the socks stayed put. How does that happen? Did someone or something remove the boots? Did animals somehow unlace them? Or did the boots rot away while the socks, thinner, less durable, remained? It doesn't make sense. And here's the detail that spawned the nickname, the Melting Man. Witnesses who saw the remains reported that it looked like Charles had melted into the ground, as if his body had liquefied and seeped into the earth, leaving only fragments behind. The jeans, unbuttoned, with bones inside. The socks with toe bones inside. The boots, gone. The crown of the skull found 12 feet away from the rest of the remains, as if tossed or dragged. Third, the paradoxical undressing. The unbuttoned jeans and the undone belt are often cited as evidence of paradoxical undressing, a phenomenon associated with severe hypothermia. In the final stages of hypothermia, the body's thermoregulatory system fails. Blood vessels that have been constricted to preserve core heat suddenly dilate. The victim experiences a rush of warmth, a false sensation, and, in confusion, begins removing clothing. It's a well-documented behavior. People found frozen to death are sometimes discovered partially or fully naked, their clothing scattered nearby. So the unbuttoned jeans fit that profile. Charles, in the throes of hypothermia, felt hot. He started undressing. He died before he could finish. Except that doesn't explain the bones inside the pants. Paradoxical undressing happens before death, not during decomposition. If Charles unbuttoned his jeans and started to remove them, they'd be pulled down or discarded, not neatly positioned with his shin bones settled inside. The scene suggests two timelines, the undressing and the decomposition. But those timelines don't mesh cleanly. It's as if the scene was staged, or as if something about the decomposition process was deeply abnormal. Fourth, the distance. Now let's talk about where he was found. Bybee Creek is approximately 12 miles from the rim of Crater Lake. Some sources say 4 miles, others say closer to 12. It depends on which specific location you measure from and which route you assume he took. But even the lower estimate of 4 miles is staggering given the conditions. Remember, Charles was ill-prepared. He likely didn't have snowshoes. The snow depth in January 1975 was over 8 feet in many areas. Without snowshoes, every step is post-holing, sinking up to your waist or deeper, then hauling yourself out, then sinking again. It's exhausting. It's slow. Experienced winter hikers estimate that post-holing reduces your speed to less than a mile per hour, sometimes much less. And Charles was doing this in a blizzard, in whiteout conditions, with no visibility, no clear sense of direction. The human body, even in peak condition, can only sustain that kind of exertion for so long before it shuts down. Rangers who reviewed the case said it was physically impossible for someone in Charles's condition to travel that distance in deep, unpacked snow. And yet, there he was. Miles from the rim, deep in the backcountry, in a drainage that most people wouldn't visit even in summer. How did he get there? Did he wander, disoriented, following some internal compass that made sense only in the haze of hypothermia? Did he think he was heading toward shelter, toward help, when in reality he was heading deeper into the wilderness? Or, and this is the darker possibility, Did he make it to that spot before the worst of the storm hit, set up a rudimentary camp, and then, when conditions deteriorated, find himself trapped? Fifth, the scattering. The remains weren't in one neat pile, they were scattered. The crown of the skull was found 12 feet from the main site. Other bones were fragmented, gnawed on. This is consistent with scavenger activity. Coyotes, ravens, maybe even black bears. Animals disperse remains. They carry off bones to chew on. They scatter things. But the scattering also complicates the reconstruction. It makes it harder to understand the original position of the body. Was Charles lying down when he died? Sitting? Curled in a fetal position trying to conserve heat? We don't know. The animals took that story and shredded it. Sixth, the melted interpretation. The description of the body as having melted is, of course, metaphorical. Human bodies don't literally melt, but decomposition in a snowpack can create that visual impression. Here's how. When a body lies in deep snow and begins to decompose, the metabolic heat of decay, combined with solar radiation absorbed by dark clothing, can melt the surrounding snow, creating a cavity. The body essentially sinks into a depression of its own making. When the snow finally melts in spring or summer, the clothing and skeletal remains collapse onto the ground in a flattened, compressed heap. To someone discovering it, it looks like the person melted into the earth. Add to that the effects of scavengers pulling at the remains, and you get a scene that's disturbing, disjointed and hard to interpret. The jeans with bones inside, the socks with toe bones, the missing boots, the scattered skull. It's a forensic puzzle where half the pieces are missing and the other half don't seem to fit together. Charles McCullough went to Crater Lake to capture beauty, to photograph the raw, frozen perfection of winter in the Cascades. And the mountain gave him what he was looking for, just not in the way he expected. He vanished into a blizzard in January 1975 and didn't reappear until 1976, miles from where he started, decomposed in a way that still confuses investigators. His jeans, unbuttoned with his shin bones inside, his socks still on his feet but his boots gone, his body scattered by scavengers, collapsed into the earth as if he'd melted into the ground. The official explanation is straightforward. Charles got caught in the storm, succumbed to hypothermia, experienced paradoxical undressing, and died. His body was buried by snow, decomposed over the winter, and was discovered by hikers the following year. Scavengers scattered the remains, case closed, but that explanation doesn't quite fit. The distance, the condition of the clothing, the missing boots, the bones inside the jeans. Each detail taken alone has a rational explanation. But together, they create a picture that feels wrong, incomplete, as if there's a piece of the story we're not seeing. Crater Lake is the deepest lake in the United States, 1,943 feet deep. The caldera is a volcanic scar, a wound in the earth that filled with snowmelt and rain over millennia. It's a place of immense geological violence, now frozen into serene beauty. But beneath that beauty is depth, darkness, secrets. Charles McCullough became one of those secrets. He walked into the snow and disappeared. And when the mountain finally gave him back, it gave back something that didn't quite make sense. A body that looked like it had melted. Bones in pants, socks without boots, a crown of a skull 12 feet from the rest. Rangers still patrol Crater Lake in winter. The snow still falls. The lake still freezes into that perfect silent blue. And somewhere in the backcountry, in a drainage near Bee Creek, there's a spot where a young photographer lay down in the snow and never got up. The mountain kept him for a year and a half, and when it finally let him go, it made sure we'd never fully understand what happened. Charles McCullough went looking for beauty and found something else, something colder, something that doesn't let go easily. And to this day, the details of his death remain as frozen and impenetrable as the lake itself. The melting man of Crater Lake. A boy who walked 12 impossible miles and left behind a puzzle that no one can solve. July 22, 2013. The Appalachian Trail, Reddington Township, Maine. If you've never hiked the AT in Maine, let me paint the picture for you. This isn't the gentle rolling hills of Virginia or the scenic overlooks of Pennsylvania. This is the 100-mile wilderness, the most remote, unforgiving stretch of the entire 2,190-mile trail. Dense forest, thick canopy, no road crossings, no cell service, no towns, no escape routes. Hikers call it the Green Tunnel because that's exactly what it feels like. Miles and miles of enclosed, claustrophobic forest where the trees press in so close you can barely see the sky. The terrain is relentless. Root-choked trails, slippery rocks, mud that sucks at your boots. And if you step off the trail, even just a few feet, the undergrowth swallows you. Visibility drops to 10, maybe 20 feet. Every direction looks the same. Green, dense, disorienting. The Appalachian Trail is marked with white blazes painted on trees every 100 feet or so, but in Maine, those blazes can be hard to spot. Miss one, and you're lost. It's beautiful, in a primal, indifferent way. And it's dangerous. Geraldine Jerry Largay is 66 years old. Her trail name is Inchworm, a nod to her slow, deliberate pace. Jerry isn't some ultralight thru hiker in her prime. She's a grandmother from Tennessee. She has a bad back, she carries too much weight in her pack, and she has, by her own admission, a terrible sense of direction. She once joked that she could get lost in a closet, but Jerry has a dream. She wants to hike the Appalachian Trail, the whole thing, from Georgia to Maine. It's a lifelong goal, and she's determined to see it through. Her husband, George, supports her. He can't hike the whole trail with her, his health won't allow it, but he leapfrogs along the route, meeting her at road crossings, resupplying her, cheering her on. It's a partnership, a shared adventure. By July 2013, Jerry has been on the trail for months. She's made it all the way to Maine, the final push. She's tired, her body is worn down, but she's close, so close. Just a few more weeks, and she'll summit Katahdin, the northern terminus. She'll be a thru hiker, she'll have done it. On July 21st, she texts George. The plan is for them to meet the next day at a road crossing. She's upbeat. She's looking forward to seeing him. Everything is on track. And then, on July 22nd, everything goes wrong. It's a mundane moment, the kind of thing that happens a dozen times a day on the trail. Jerry needs to use the restroom. There are no facilities out here, no outhouses. You just step off the trail, find a private spot, do your business, and come back. It's routine. Every hiker does it. Jerry steps off the trail. Just a few steps, maybe 10 feet, maybe 20. Into the thick underbrush. She's careful. She doesn't want to go far. She knows how easy it is to lose your bearings. She finishes. She turns around to head back to the trail, and it's gone. Not hard to see gone, not hidden by a tree gone, just gone. She's surrounded by forest. Every direction looks identical. She can't see the white blazes. She can't see the path. Panic flutters in her chest. Okay, stay calm. It's right here. She just needs to walk a little bit and she'll find it. She walks, she looks, she walks some more. The forest closes in. The trees all look the same. She's turned around, disoriented. She doesn't know which way is which. Minutes pass, then an hour. The trail is gone. Jerry Largay is lost. She does what she's supposed to do. She tries to stay calm. She tries to retrace her steps, but the forest has no landmarks, no features, just endless green. She pulls out her cell phone, no signal. She tries to text George, in some trouble. Got off trail to go to BR, now lost. Can you call AMC to see if a trail maintainer can help me? Somewhere north of Woods Road, XOX. She hits send. The message doesn't go through. She tries again and again. 10 times she tries to send the text. It sits in her outbox undelivered, waiting for a signal that will never come. Hours pass. Jerry makes a decision. She's not going to wander aimlessly and risk getting more lost. She's going to stay put. She finds a relatively flat spot. She sets up her tent. She has food, she has water, she has a whistle, a signal mirror, matches for a fire. The search and rescue teams will find her. She just needs to wait. It's the right call. It's exactly what survival experts tell you to do. STOP. Sit, think, observe, plan. Stay in one place. Make yourself visible. Wait for help. So Jerry waits. When she doesn't meet George at the road crossing on July 23rd, he raises the alarm. The Maine Warden Service launches a search, and it's massive. Helicopters equipped with infrared cameras, K9 tracking units, ground teams combing the forest, volunteers, professional searchers. At its peak, the search involves dozens of people in aircraft covering miles of terrain. They search for weeks. They find nothing. On August 9th, 18 days after Jerry vanished, the official search is scaled back. She's presumed dead. The assumption is that she died quickly, probably from a fall or sudden medical event, and that her body is hidden under dense canopy or in a ravine where it can't be spotted from the air. But that assumption is wrong, because Jerry Largay didn't die quickly. She didn't die in the first week. She didn't even die in the first 2 weeks. Jerry Largay survived for 26 days, 2 years later. October 2015. A Navy surveyor is doing work in the forest near where Jerry disappeared. He's off trail, bushwhacking through dense undergrowth, and he finds something, a tent, a small one-person tent. It's weathered, faded by 2 years of sun and rain, but it's intact. The surveyor approaches. He unzips the tent flap. Inside, zipped into a sleeping bag, are human remains, skeletal, clothing still intact, and next to the body, a journal. It's Jerry Largay. The surveyor contacts authorities. Maine State Police and the Warden Service respond. They recover the remains and the personal effects. And when they read the journal, the full horror of what happened becomes clear. Jerry kept a journal. Day by day, she documented her survival, her hope, her fear, her despair. The entries are methodical, almost clinical at first, and then increasingly despondent as the days stretch into weeks. She tried everything. She blew her whistle, 3 sharp blasts, the universal distress signal. She tried to start fires to create smoke signals. She tried to make herself visible from the air. She rationed her food carefully. She collected rainwater to drink. She did everything right. But the forest was too dense. The canopy was too thick. The search teams passed within 100 yards of her camp, 100 yards, but they didn't see her. The dogs didn't pick up her scent. The helicopters flew overhead, infrared cameras scanning the forest, but the thick tree cover blocked the heat signature. Jerry was alive, alert, and trying desperately to signal for help, and the searchers missed her. Not because they weren't trying. Not because they weren't skilled, but because the forest is just that effective at hiding people. The unsent text messages haunt this case. In some trouble. Got off trail to go to BR, now lost. It's so mundane, so simple. A quick bathroom break that turns into a death sentence, and the message sits in her phone, unsent, for 26 days. If it had gone through, if there had been even 1 bar of signal, George would have called for help immediately. Search teams would have been mobilized within hours, not days. They would have started searching in the right area. Jerry might have been found alive, but the signal never came. The text never sent. And Jerry waited, alone, in a tent that was invisible to the world. Here's the part that keeps people awake at night. How does the most sophisticated search and rescue operation in Maine history, helicopters, dogs, trained professionals, miss a woman sitting in a tent less than a mile from the trail? The answer is, Maine is that dense. The forest is that unforgiving. Visibility from the air is near zero in many areas. The canopy is so thick that even infrared can't penetrate it effectively. And scent? Scent behaves strangely in dense forest. It pools in low areas. It's disrupted by wind. It's masked by the overwhelming smell of vegetation and decay. The dogs did their best, but they were fighting the environment. Jerry's campsite was later measured to be approximately 2,600 feet, less than half a mile, from the Appalachian Trail. Half a mile. In open terrain, that's a 10-minute walk. In the Maine woods, it might as well be another planet. Now, let's talk about what those 26 days must have been like, because this is where the case becomes genuinely harrowing. Jerry survived for nearly a month, alone, injured. She mentioned in her journal that she'd hurt her leg. Hungry. Her food ran out. Thirsty. She relied on rainwater. Cold, July turns to August, and the nights in Maine can drop into the 40s. Scared. She knew she was dying. She wrote about it. She accepted it. And every day she must have heard the helicopters, the distant thrum of rotors, the search teams calling her name, whistles blowing in the distance. She must have blown her own whistle back, screaming until her voice gave out, hoping someone would hear. But no one did. The psychological torture of that is almost incomprehensible. To be so close to rescue, to know people are looking for you, to hear them, and to remain invisible, unreachable. On August 6, 2013, 15 days after she got lost, Jerry wrote what would be her final coherent journal entry. It's heartbreaking in its simplicity and grace. When you find my body, please call my husband George and my daughter Carrie. It will be the greatest kindness for them to know that I am dead and where you found me, no matter how many years from now. Please find it in your heart to make the call. Thank you. She signed it, she dated it, and then she added a few more lines, instructions really, practical details, where she was, what had happened, a final act of love, trying to make it easier for the people who would eventually find her. She survived for another 20 days after that entry. We don't know exactly when she died. Forensic analysis of skeletal remains can't pinpoint the exact day. But her last clear thoughts, her last organized words were about George and Carrie, about sparing them the agony of not knowing. Here's one more layer of tragedy. Jerry's campsite was located on a U.S. Navy SEER training range, a restricted military area used for wilderness survival training. It's off-limits to the public. It's not regularly patrolled or monitored. Searchers were hesitant to enter it during the initial search because of access restrictions and the assumption that Jerry wouldn't have wandered that far. But she did. And that military boundary, that bureaucratic line on a map, may have contributed to the search teams not finding her in time. Here's the cruelest irony of the case. Jerry did everything right. She stayed put. She didn't wander aimlessly and exhaust herself. She conserved energy. She waited for rescue. It's exactly what survival experts tell you to do. But if Jerry had ignored that advice, if she'd kept walking, kept searching for the trail, she might have found it. She might have stumbled onto a road or a stream that led to civilization. The campsite was only 2,600 feet from the trail. If she'd walked in the right direction, she'd have hit it in minutes. But which direction is right when every direction looks the same? It's an impossible decision. And Jerry, following the rules, following the advice, stayed put and died. Geraldine Larguet's remains were found on October 14, 2015. She was lying in her sleeping bag inside her tent in a small clearing she'd chosen as her final resting place, 2 years and 3 months after she'd stepped off the Appalachian Trail to use the restroom. The Maine Warden Service determined that she died of starvation and exposure, likely sometime in late August 2013. She'd survived for 26 days, longer than most people could in those conditions, longer than she should have. She fought, she waited, she hoped, and the forest took her anyway. This case haunts me because it's not a monster, it's not a serial killer, it's not foul play, it's just the forest being a forest, indifferent, dense, disorienting. Jerry stepped 10 feet off the trail and the world swallowed her. The unsent text messages sit in digital archives now, extracted from her phone by forensic technicians. In some trouble, 10 attempts to send, all failed. If just one had gone through, she'd probably be alive today. She'd have finished her hike, she'd have summited Katahdin, she'd be home with George, with Carrie, telling stories about that scary day she got lost and had to wait for rescue. But that's not what happened. The signal didn't come. The searchers didn't find her. And Jerry Larguet wrote in her journal with heartbreaking clarity, "When you find my body, please call my husband. It will be the greatest kindness." The Appalachian Trail stretches 2,290 miles from Georgia to Maine. Thousands of people hike it every year. Most of them make it. Most of them have stories of beauty, challenge, triumph. But Jerry's story is a reminder that the wilderness doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care if you did everything right. 10 feet off the trail, that's all it took. 10 feet into the green tunnel, and Geraldine Larguet was gone. The trail is still there. The white blazes are still painted on the trees. And somewhere in that dense Maine forest, near where a Navy surveyor found a weathered tent, there's a place where a grandmother waited for 26 days, hoping someone would hear her whistle. But the forest is thick, and the helicopters flew overhead. And she waited, and waited, and the green tunnel kept its secret for 2 more years. October 8, 1976, Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Tennessee. It's a crisp, clear autumn Friday. The leaves are turning, brilliant reds, oranges, yellows painting the mountainsides. The weather is perfect for a field trip. Not too hot, not too cold. Just that ideal fall temperature that makes you want to be outside. A yellow school bus pulls into the parking lot at Clingman's Dome, the highest point in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The elevation here is 6,643 feet. The air is thinner. The views are spectacular. And stepping off that bus are about 40 students and several teachers from Bearden High School in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's a senior class field trip, a reward, a chance to get out of the classroom and experience nature. Now, let me set the scene properly because the context is crucial. This isn't some remote backcountry expedition. This is a supervised school outing on one of the most popular trails in the most visited national park in America. Clingman's Dome gets thousands of visitors every year. The trails are well maintained, well marked, and heavily trafficked. Teachers are present. There are 40 teenagers, loud, energetic, impossible to miss. This is chaos in the best way. Laughter, chatter, the sound of sneakers on gravel, backpacks rustling. It's the opposite of isolation. Trenny Lynn Gibson is 16 years old. She's a junior actually, not a senior, but she's there with the group. She's 5'3", about 115 pounds, with long brown hair and green eyes. She's wearing blue jeans, a blue blouse, a pastel blue striped sweater, and, this detail matters, a brown and orange plaid wool jacket that she borrowed from a classmate, Robert Simpson. She's also wearing blue Adidas shoes. The Adidas detail is important because it's distinctive. It's something searchers can look for. Trenny is popular. She's not the quiet kid sitting alone. She's talking, laughing, hiking with different groups of friends throughout the day. She's relaxed, happy. This is supposed to be fun, and by all accounts, it is. The plan is simple. Hike from Clingman's Dome down the Forney Ridge Trail to Andrews Bald, a grassy meadow with panoramic views. Hang out, eat lunch, take photos, and hike back. Total distance? Maybe 3.5 miles round trip. Easy. The kind of hike you do in sneakers with a packed lunch and zero sense of danger. The group sets out around midday. The hike to Andrews Bald is downhill, which makes it easy on the way out. The students spread out naturally. Some kids are fast, some are slow. Some stop to look at things, some charge ahead. Teachers are scattered throughout, keeping a loose eye on everyone. It's organized chaos, the kind of field trip where you trust that 40 teenagers will generally stay on the trail and not do anything stupid. They reach Andrews Bald. It's beautiful, an open, grassy clearing surrounded by forest with views of the mountains rolling into the distance. The students eat lunch, they goof around, they take photos. It's exactly what a field trip should be. Around 3 p.m., they start heading back. And this is where the timeline becomes critical. The hike back is uphill, which means the group spreads out even more. The faster, fitter kids pull ahead. The slower kids lag behind. Teachers drift through the middle, checking on students, making sure no one's in distress. Trenny is somewhere in the middle, not at the very front, not at the very back. She's with a small cluster of friends at various points. Accounts vary slightly, but the consensus is that she's hiking with different groups, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind. She stops to rest with some friends. They sit down. She decides to keep walking. She tells them she'll see them back at the bus. Normal, routine. No one thinks twice about it. She walks ahead. The trail curves, winds through trees, follows the ridgeline. There are students maybe a minute or two ahead of her. There are students maybe a minute or two behind her. The trail is narrow here, single file in places. Visibility is limited by the dense vegetation and the twists of the path. Trenny rounds a bend, a curve in the trail, trees on either side, just a normal section of path, identical to the dozens of other sections they've already walked. And that's it. That's the last time anyone sees Trenny Gibson. The students behind her round the same bend a minute later, maybe 2 minutes at most. Trenny should be right there, just ahead on the trail. But she's not. The trail is empty. They call her name. No response. They figure she must have sped up, joined the group ahead. They keep walking. But when they all regroup at the parking lot, Trenny isn't there. Students start asking, "Where's Trenny?" Someone says, "I thought she was with you." Someone else says, "No, I thought she was with you." The realization hits like cold water. No one knows where Trenny is. No one has seen her for the last 30 minutes of the hike. Teachers do a head count, 39 students. There should be 40. Panic sets in. Teachers and students immediately hike back down the trail, calling her name, checking side paths, looking behind trees. They search for hours. As the sun starts to set, park rangers are called. By nightfall, it's a full-scale search operation. Let's stop and really think about what happened here, because the more you examine the facts, the more impossible this becomes. First, the proximity factor. Trenny Gibson did not vanish in the middle of nowhere. She vanished on a marked, maintained trail, surrounded by 40 classmates and multiple teachers. She was hiking in a line, students ahead of her, students behind her. The window of time where she was out of direct sight is maybe 60 seconds, maybe 2 minutes at the absolute most. In that 60 to 120 seconds, Trenny Lynn Gibson ceased to exist. No scream, no shout for help, no sound of someone crashing through the underbrush, just silence. And then absence. How does that happen? If she'd slipped off the trail and fallen, there would be noise. Rocks sliding, branches breaking, a cry of surprise or pain. If she'd been grabbed, attacked by a person or an animal, there would be a struggle, a scream, something. But the students ahead and behind heard nothing. The forest was quiet. And then Trenny was gone. Second, the trail isn't that dangerous. The Forney Ridge Trail isn't a technical scramble. It's not clinging to the edge of a cliff. Yes, there are steep drop-offs in the Smokies, but this particular section of trail is relatively safe. It's well used. Families hike it, kids hike it. You'd have to actively leave the trail and intentionally walk off into the woods to put yourself in danger. And even if Trenny had stepped off the trail for some reason, privacy, curiosity, taking a shortcut, the forest in the Smokies is dense, but it's not silent. Moving through rhododendron thickets makes noise. You crash, you rustle, you disturb things. And again, the students behind her would have heard it, but they heard nothing. Third, the tracking dogs. Within hours of the disappearance, tracking dogs were brought in, bloodhounds, German shepherds, professional canine units trained to find missing persons. The dogs picked up Trenny's scent on the trail easily. They followed it down the path, confirming she'd been there. And then something strange happened. The scent trail led back toward the developed area, toward the road, toward Klingman's Dome, toward civilization. The dogs tracked her scent for about 1.5 miles, past the observation tower, along the paved access road. And then, at a specific location near Newfound Gap Road, the scent just stopped, dead. The dogs circled, sniffed, searched, nothing. The trail ended. In tracking and forensic terms, when a scent trail ends abruptly at a roadway, it typically means one thing. The subject got into a vehicle. The scent doesn't just vanish. It stops because the person is no longer on the ground. They're in a car. They've been picked up. So the dogs are telling us that Trenny didn't wander off into the woods and die of exposure. The dogs are saying she made it to the road. And then what? Did she hitchhike? Was she picked up by someone? Did she voluntarily leave? That's the theory that haunts this case, but it raises more questions than it answers. Fourth, the evidence at the road. At the location where the dogs lost the scent, searchers found something. 8 cigarette butts. Same brand. All clustered together, as if someone had been standing there for a while, smoking, waiting. Waiting for what? Or for whom? Now, this was 1976. The road wasn't closed. People drove through the park all the time. The cigarette butts could be unrelated, just litter from a random tourist. But the fact that they were found at the exact spot where Trenny's scent trail ended is chilling. It suggests someone was there, standing, watching, waiting. And there's another detail. Near where Trenny was last seen on the trail, searchers found broken ferns and a partially consumed beer can. Again, could be unrelated, could be trash from another hiker. But in the context of a teenage girl vanishing, every piece of debris becomes a potential clue and a potential nightmare. Fifth, the jacket remember. Trenny was wearing a borrowed jacket, brown and orange plaid, borrowed from Robert Simpson. That jacket was never found. Neither were her blue Adidas shoes, neither was her blue striped sweater. In nearly 50 years, despite thousands of hikers passing through that area, despite search operations, despite people looking, nothing. No scrap of fabric snagged on a branch, no shoe lodged in a creek. No bones discovered by hunters decades later. The Smokies are dense, yes, but they're not impenetrable. Bodies get found, clothing gets found, evidence surfaces. But in Trenny's case, nothing. It's as if she dematerialized. So what happened? Let's walk through the possibilities. Theory 1. She got lost and died of exposure. This is the simplest explanation. Trenny stepped off the trail, maybe to use the restroom, maybe distracted by something, and got disoriented. The forest swallowed her. She wandered, panicked, exhausted herself, and succumbed to hypothermia that night. Her body is still out there, hidden under leaves or in a crevice. But the dogs don't support this. The dogs tracked her to the road, and the proximity of the other students makes it hard to believe she could wander far enough to get truly lost in 60 seconds. Theory 2. Abduction. Someone grabbed her. A predator, human, not animal, was watching the trail, saw an opportunity, and took it. The cigarette butts at the road suggest premeditation. Someone waiting, someone who knew the trail, knew the timing, knew there'd be a moment where a student would be isolated. But this theory requires an insane amount of risk. 40 students, multiple teachers, a crowded trail. Grabbing someone in that environment, overpowering them silently and getting them to a vehicle without being seen or heard? That's not impossible, but it's incredibly difficult. And yet, people do disappear. Predators do exist. And 1976 was a different era. Less surveillance, fewer cameras, easier to vanish. The FBI got involved. Agents interviewed students, probed for rumors of a planned runaway, looked into Trenny's personal life. They found nothing. No motive for her to leave, no secret boyfriend, no plan to start over, just a teenage girl who went on a field trip and never came home. Theory 3. The hole in the map. This is the theory that enters the realm of high strangeness. The idea that there are places, thin spots maybe, where people just vanish. Not because of a predator, not because of an accident, but because of something we don't understand. The forest opens up and swallows people, and sometimes it doesn't give them back. I'm skeptical of this. I don't think the Smokies have portals or dimensional rifts, but I also can't explain how a teenage girl vanishes in 60 seconds from a crowded trail without a single sound. I can't explain why the scent trail ends at a road with cigarette butts nearby. I can't explain why no evidence, no clothing, no bones, no shoes has ever been found. There's a small, sad footnote to this case. Years after Trenny's disappearance, there were reports of a comb being found in the search area. Some sources suggest it might have been hers. The chain of custody is unclear. It was never definitively linked to Trenny. It's one of those details that floats around the case, tantalizing but unverifiable. A maybe clue in a sea of unknowns. The search for Trenny Gibson was one of the largest in Great Smoky Mountains history. Over 750 people participated. National Guard helicopters, FBI agents, bloodhounds, volunteers. They searched for weeks. They covered the trail, the surrounding forest, the ridges, the valleys. They found nothing. Bearden High School was shattered. 40 students went on a field trip. 39 came home. The one who didn't, Trenny Gibson, became a ghost. A name on a missing persons report. A cold case file gathering dust. Her family never got closure. Her father, Robert Gibson, conducted his own search operation in 1977. He organized 230 people. They covered 15 miles of trails. They found nothing. The mountain kept it secret. Trenny's case is still open. TBI case number 762590. she's still listed as missing, not dead, missing, because without a body, without evidence, she exists in limbo. 16 years old forever, frozen in time on a trail in October 1976. Here's what haunts me about this case. Trenny didn't vanish in the middle of nowhere. She didn't wander off alone into the wilderness. She vanished from a line of hikers, students ahead, students behind, teachers scattered throughout, 40 people within shouting distance. And in the 60 seconds she was out of direct sight, she ceased to exist. No scream, no sound, no struggle. Just a girl rounding a bend on a trail. And then absence. The Great Smoky Mountains are beautiful. They're accessible. They're visited by millions of people every year. But they're also vast, ancient, indifferent, and sometimes they take people. Not with violence, not with drama, just quietly. A step, a turn, and you're gone. Trenny Gibson went on a field trip. She hiked with her friends, she laughed, she rested on the trail, she walked ahead. And somewhere between one footstep and the next, the world swallowed her. The trail is still there. Andrew's bald is still there. The brown and orange plaid jacket is still missing. The blue Adidas shoes are still missing. Trenny Gibson is still missing. And the mountain isn't talking. July 27, 1996, Death Valley National Park, California. Let me give you some context about Death Valley in July, because if you've never been there in the summer, it's hard to comprehend just how hostile this place is. Death Valley isn't just hot, it's one of the hottest places on planet Earth. The record temperature, set at Furnace Creek in 1913, is 134 degrees Fahrenheit. But even on a normal summer day, temperatures routinely hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. At those temperatures, the human body is fighting a losing battle. You're not just uncomfortable, you're in active danger. Your sweat evaporates instantly. You dehydrate at a terrifying rate. Without water, without shade, survival is measured in hours. 4, maybe 6 hours if you're lucky and stay still. If you're moving, exerting yourself, trying to walk out, cut that time in half. The ground temperature is even worse. Pavement can reach 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The sand will burn your feet through shoes. Car interiors become ovens. Metal surfaces are untouchable. This isn't a place where you take a wrong turn and figure it out. This is a place where a wrong turn kills you. And yet, Death Valley is also a major tourist destination. Hundreds of thousands of people visit every year. They drive the paved roads, stop at the visitor centers, take photos at Badwater Basin, and marvel at the alien landscape. It's safe, as long as you stay on the designated routes, as long as you have air conditioning, as long as you don't do anything stupid. On July 22, 1996, a family of 4 arrives in Death Valley. They're German tourists. Egbert Rimkus, 34 years old, an architect from Dresden. His partner, Cornelia Meyer, 27. Egbert's son, Georg Weber, who's 11. And Cornelia's son, Max Meyer, who's just 4 years old. They're on a dream vacation, a tour of the American West. They've rented a vehicle, a green 1996 Plymouth Voyager minivan. Now, let's pause on that detail. A Plymouth Voyager. This is a soccer mom vehicle. Low clearance, front-wheel drive, designed for highways and grocery store parking lots, not wilderness roads. It's completely unsuited for off-road travel. But they don't know that. They're tourists. They trust the map. They're excited. They're happy. They stop at Furnace Creek Visitor Center. There's a receipt that confirms they bought an informational booklet. They're trying to learn, trying to be prepared. They have no idea what's about to happen. July 23, 1996. The temperature reaches 124 degrees. The family is somewhere in Death Valley. Their plan, as best as investigators can reconstruct it, is to drive from Death Valley to Yosemite National Park. On a map, if you draw a straight line, it doesn't look that far. Maybe 150 miles. But maps lie. Maps don't show you that the roads connecting those points are primitive mining tracks, washes, and 4x4 only routes that will destroy a standard vehicle. The family drives south from Furnace Creek. They're heading toward the Panamint Range. At some point, they turn off the main road. Maybe they see what looks like a shortcut. Maybe they're following an outdated map. Maybe they trust their GPS or their instincts. Whatever the reason, they drive into Hanaupa Canyon, then turn toward an area called Warm Springs. At Warm Springs, an abandoned mining camp, they stop. There's a visitor log, a notebook where hikers and explorers sign in. Egbert writes an entry in German, 7-23 in 986. Connie Egbert Georg Max, we are going through the pass. The pass. He means Mengel Pass, a notorious route over the Panamint Range. On a map, it looks passable. In reality, it's a brutal, rocky 4x4 trail that requires high clearance, aggressive tires, and experience. People who know Death Valley call Mengel Pass insane. It's not a road, it's a challenge, and the Rimkus family in their Plymouth Voyager minivan decides to drive it. They don't make it. The minivan gets stuck. 3 tires blow out. The steel rims bend from being driven on the rocks. The undercarriage scrapes and grinds. Eventually, the van can't move anymore. They're stranded in Anvil Spring Canyon, miles from any paved road, in 124-degree heat. And then they make a decision that seals their fate. They leave the vehicle and start walking. When the family doesn't return the rental car, the agency reports it. Police are notified. A search begins. On October 21, 1996, 3 months after they vanished, a Park Service pilot spots the green Plymouth Voyager from the air. It's in a remote canyon, miles off any established road. Rangers hike in. The scene is eerie. The van is upright, intact. 3 tires are shredded. The supplies are inside. Coleman sleeping bags, clothes, camping gear. But critically, the keys, wallets, passports, and the family are gone. It's clear they packed up essentials and walked away. But where did they go? Searchers comb the area. They check water sources, springs, old mining camps. They check the roads, the washes, the obvious routes. They find nothing. No bodies, no clothing, no trace. For 13 years, the Rimkus family is simply gone, swallowed by the desert. Here's the thing about search and rescue. They operate on logic. They use models, statistics, behavioral profiles. When someone goes missing in the desert, searchers check the obvious places first: water sources, roads, trails. They assume people will do the rational thing, head toward help, stay near their vehicle, conserve energy. But the Rimkus family didn't do the rational thing. And that's why they weren't found for 13 years. Tom Mahood is a Death Valley enthusiast, a searcher, a man obsessed with solving this case. For years, he studied the maps, the evidence, the timeline. And he realized something. Everyone was searching in the wrong place because they were assuming the family made rational decisions. But Mahood understood that people in extreme stress, dehydration, heat exhaustion, fear, don't think clearly. They make decisions based on flawed logic. Mahood looked at the map from the family's perspective. They were Germans, Europeans. In Germany, when you see a military base on a map, it means fences, guards, infrastructure, help. Mahood theorized that the Rimkus family looked at their map and saw the China Lake Naval Weapons Station, a massive military installation south of their location. They thought, if we walk to the military base, we'll find people, we'll find rescue. But the China Lake boundary in the Mojave Desert isn't a fence, it's not patrolled, it's just an invisible line on a map cutting through miles of empty, hostile desert. Mahood called his theory the southerly scenario. Instead of walking back toward the main road, or toward known water sources, the family walked south, toward the military base. It was the opposite of what searchers expected, and it explained why no one found them. In November 2009, 13 years after the family vanished, Mahood and a fellow searcher named Les Walker decided to test the theory. They hiked south from the abandoned van, following the most likely route toward the China Lake boundary. And they found them. Before they found the bodies, they found something else: a beer bottle. A Bud Ice bottle sitting upright under a bush, about 1.7 miles east of the van. At first glance, it's just litter, but Mahood looked closer. The bottle had a sediment ring inside, a water line. It had been used to carry liquid. Think about what that means. The family was so desperate for water that they were using an old beer bottle to carry whatever they could find. Urine, maybe, muddy runoff, anything. It's one of the most haunting artifacts in the case because it paints a picture of total desperation. They weren't just thirsty, they were dying. Miles further south, in a remote wash near the China Lake boundary, Mahood and Walker found the bodies, 2 adults, skeletal remains scattered by scavengers. Identification cards belonging to Egbert Rimkus and Cornelia Meyer were nearby. Cornelia's passport, her bank ID, a journal or planner with German writing. DNA testing confirmed it was them. The search was over. But what about the children? The official reports are murky. Some sources say small bone fragments and a child's shoe were found in the area, but the remains couldn't be definitively identified. Others say the children's bodies were never recovered. What we know is that by 2010, Max Meyer was removed from missing persons databases, suggesting authorities believe he died with the family. The question that haunts everyone who studies this case: why did they leave the vehicle? In desert survival, rule number 1 is stay with your vehicle. The van is shade. It's a signal visible from the air. It's shelter. Even a disabled van is better than walking into open desert with 2 small children in 124-degree heat. But they left. They packed up. They took the essentials, and they walked. Why? Panic. They'd been stuck for hours, maybe overnight. The heat was unbearable. The kids were crying. Water was running low. They looked at the map and saw the military base just a few inches away on paper, maybe 10, 15 miles. They thought, we can make it. We have to try. But the reality of walking in Death Valley is nothing like the map suggests. The terrain is brutal, rocky, uneven, no trails. The heat is overwhelming. Every step saps your energy. Dehydration sets in fast. Disorientation follows. You start making worse and worse decisions. And the military base, it wasn't 10 miles, it was farther. And when they got there was nothing. No fence, no guards, no help. Just more desert. Second, the timeline of death. Based on the location of the bodies and the condition of the remains, investigators estimate the family survived perhaps a day, maybe 2 after leaving the van. The children would have gone first. Small bodies dehydrate faster, then the adults. They died together, or within hours of each other, in a wash miles from anywhere. The desert scavengers, coyotes, ravens, did the rest. By the time Mahood found them, they were skeletal, scattered, anonymous except for the IDs that had survived. 3. The 3 flat tires. Let's go back to the van for a second. 3 flat tires. The rims were bent from being driven on. This tells us something important. They didn't stop immediately when the first tire blew. They kept driving, desperately, trying to push through, trying to make it work. The sound must have been horrific. Metal grinding on rock, the van lurching and scraping, but they didn't stop. They couldn't stop. They were already in too deep, and when the van finally couldn't move another inch, they were miles from the main road, in a canyon with no shade, no water, and no way out. Fourth, the cultural disconnect. Part of what makes this case so tragic is the cultural disconnect. Egbert and Cornelia were Europeans. They were used to a certain kind of landscape, temperate, forgiving, with infrastructure. In Germany, if you get lost, you walk a few miles and find a village. Roads are everywhere. Help is close. Death Valley is the opposite. It's vast, empty, and utterly hostile. There are no villages, no random houses. Roads are rare, and the ones that exist are often impassable without the right vehicle. But the Rimkus family didn't know that. They trusted the map. They trusted their instincts. And they made a series of small decisions, each one reasonable in isolation, that added up to catastrophe. The Death Valley Germans case was solved not by luck, but by obsession. Tom Mahood spent years thinking about this family. Walking the desert, testing theories, refusing to give up. And in 2009, he gave them back to their families. He gave them closure. The remains of Egbert Rimkus and Cornelia Meyer were returned to Germany. Funerals were held. The case, which had haunted the Death Valley community for over a decade, was finally closed. But the tragedy of it lingers. This wasn't a serial killer. This wasn't foul play. This was a wrong turn, a bad map, a Plymouth Voyager minivan driven into terrain it had no business being in, 3 flat tires, and a decision born of panic and hope, to walk toward a mirage on a map. They walked south into the furnace, carrying 2 small children. They walked until they couldn't walk anymore, and the desert, indifferent and ancient, erased them. Death Valley has killed hundreds of people over the years. Most die quickly. Heat stroke, dehydration, a moment of carelessness. The Rimkus family's death was slower. They had time to think, time to realize the mistake, time to write in a logbook, "We are going through the pass," time to hope, and then time to understand that hope wasn't enough. The beer bottle under the bush, the bent rims of the van, the skeletal remains in a wash near an invisible boundary, these are the pieces of a story that ended in silence and heat. Tom Mahood found them because he refused to assume rationality. He put himself in their shoes, hot, scared, dehydrated, looking at a map, and he walked the path they walked. And at the end of that path, 13 years after they vanished, he found what was left. Death Valley is beautiful, alien, unforgiving, and it doesn't care about your plans, your maps, or your hopes. The Rimkus family learned that the hard way. They came to see the American West, to experience the desert, to make memories. And the desert gave them exactly what they asked for, just not in the way they expected. A wrong turn, 3 flat tires, a walk into the heat, and then silence. That's all it takes in Death Valley. One bad decision, and the desert swallows you whole. January 13th, 1980, Chiricahua National Monument, southeastern Arizona. If you've never been to Chiricahua, it's hard to describe. Imagine a forest, but instead of trees, it's made of rock. Towering stone pillars, balanced boulders, hoodoos that defy gravity. The Apache called it the land of standing up rocks. Modern visitors call it the wonderland of rocks. It's stunning, alien, really. Like walking through a stone cathedral designed by chaos. But here's the thing about Chiricahua. It's also a maze, miles of narrow canyons, rock formations that look identical from every angle, crevices and caves everywhere. If you wanted to hide something or someone, this is the place to do it. The landscape doesn't just offer hiding spots, it offers thousands of them, and the location, that matters. Chiricahua sits in southeastern Arizona, about 40 miles from the Mexican border. This isn't just a tourist park, it's a corridor. For decades, this area has been used for smuggling, drugs, people, weapons. The isolation, the proximity to the border, the rugged terrain that makes surveillance difficult. It's perfect for criminal activity, and everyone who works here knows it. Paul Braxton Fugate is 41 years old. He's not a tourist. He's not a hiker on vacation. He's a National Park Service ranger and naturalist. He works here. He knows this place, the trails, the rocks, the hidden springs, the danger zones. He spent years learning this landscape, teaching visitors about it, protecting it. Paul is also unconventional. He wears his hair long. He has a thick handlebar mustache. In the late 1970s, this is a problem for the National Park Service, which has strict grooming standards. In 1970, Paul was actually fired for refusing to cut his hair and shave his mustache. He fought the dismissal, took it to court, and won. He was reinstated in 1976 with back pay. He's stubborn, principled, not someone who follows rules just because they're rules, but he's also professional, dedicated. He loves this place, he loves the work. And on January 13th, 1980, he's on duty. Just another day at the office. It's mid-afternoon, around 2 p.m. Paul is at the Chiricahua Visitor Center, the hub of operations for the monument. He tells a co-worker he's heading out to check one of the trails. Some accounts say it was the Fairway Ranch area, others are less specific. But the point is, it's a routine patrol. Rangers do this constantly. You walk the trail, check for hazards, make sure visitors are safe, document anything unusual. It's not glamorous, it's not dangerous, it's just part of the job. Paul is wearing his uniform, the gray and green NPS shirt with the iconic arrowhead patch, the gold-colored ranger badge. He has his radio. He's expected back by 4:00 p.m. to close up the visitor center for the day. He walks out. He's seen heading toward the trailhead, and that's it. That's the last confirmed sighting of Paul Fugate. 4 p.m. comes and goes. Paul doesn't return. His co-workers aren't immediately concerned. Maybe he got delayed. Maybe he's still out on patrol. But as the sun sets and the temperature drops, worry sets in. This is Arizona in January. It gets cold at night, especially at elevation, and Paul isn't answering his radio. By evening, it's clear something is wrong. A search is launched, and here's the thing. When one of your own goes missing, you don't hold back. The response is immediate and overwhelming. Park rangers, law enforcement, tracking dogs, volunteers, they know the terrain, they know Paul, they're motivated. They search all night, they search the next day, they search for weeks. They cover the trails, the canyons, the rock formations. They check every cave, every crevice, every hidden spot. They use helicopters, they use bloodhounds, they interview visitors, check vehicle logs, retrace Paul's known routes. They find nothing. No radio, no badge, no uniform shirt, no blood, no sign of a struggle, no body. Paul Fugate has vanished as completely as if he'd been erased from existence. The first theory, the one the Park Service initially leaned toward, is that Paul staged his disappearance, that he walked away from his life voluntarily. This theory is based on Paul's history of conflict with the agency. He'd been fired once. He was known for butting heads with management. Maybe he was unhappy. Maybe he wanted out. Maybe he just walked into the desert and started over. But let's look at the facts. When Paul left the visitor center on January 13th, he left behind some very important things. His wallet, his identification, his keys, and, according to some reports, $300 in cash. That's not pocket change, especially in 1980. That's significant money. So here's the logic gap. If you're planning to disappear and start a new life, you need resources. You need money. You need ID to rent a hotel room, buy a bus ticket, open a bank account. You need your wallet. But Paul left all of that behind. He walked out with nothing but the uniform on his back and a radio. That's not the behavior of someone planning to vanish. That's the behavior of someone planning to come back in a couple of hours. And there's another detail. Paul also left behind expensive camera equipment at home. He was a nature photographer. His camera gear was valuable, and it was his passion. If you're walking away from your life, you take the things you love. You don't leave them on a shelf. The walkaway theory doesn't hold up. And yet, for years, that's how the Park Service treated it. Paul's wife, Dodie Fugate, was even denied survivor benefits because the official stance was that Paul had abandoned his position. It wasn't until 1986, 6 years later, that his death was legally recognized, allowing benefits to be released. Second, the accident theory. Okay, so maybe Paul didn't walk away. Maybe he had an accident. Maybe he fell off a cliff or slipped into a crevice or had a medical emergency, a heart attack, a stroke, and died on the trail. That's plausible. Accidents happen, even to experienced people. But here's the problem. Paul Fugate was a ranger. He knew this terrain intimately. He'd been working here for years. He wasn't some tourist wandering off-trail in flip-flops. He knew where the hazards were. He knew how to move safely. And even if he did fall or collapse, searchers should have found him. Chiricahua is rugged, yes, but it's not infinite. The search operation was exhaustive. Helicopters flew grid patterns. Dogs swept the ground. Rangers who knew every inch of the park combed the trails and the backcountry. If Paul had died within a reasonable distance of the visitor center, they should have found him. Buzzards should have circled. Scavengers should have scattered remains. The desert doesn't erase bodies, it preserves them. Dry heat, low humidity. Bodies mummify, bones last for decades, and yet nothing. No bones, no clothing, no radio. It's as if Paul walked into a void. Now, here's where the case takes a darker turn. There's a witness report, unverified, but persistent, that on the afternoon of January 13th, someone saw Paul Fugate in a pickup truck. He was slumped between two men. He appeared unconscious or incapacitated. The truck was leaving the area, heading away from the monument. If this report is accurate, it changes everything. It means Paul didn't fall. He didn't have a medical event. He was taken, forcibly. But taken by whom? And why? Third, the drug corridor theory. Chiricahua National Monument is located in Cochise County, Arizona, which has a long, complicated history with border smuggling. The monument sits about 40 miles north of the Mexican border. The terrain is ideal for illegal crossings, remote, rugged, hard to patrol. In 1980, drug trafficking through this area was already a significant problem. It's only gotten worse since. Here's the theory. Paul was on patrol. He was checking a trail, maybe hiking into a backcountry area, and he saw something he wasn't supposed to see: a drug drop, a meeting, a stash. Maybe he stumbled on it by accident. Maybe he was investigating a report, but he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Drug cartels don't negotiate with witnesses. They don't take chances. If a uniformed park ranger walks up on a smuggling operation, that ranger is a threat, and threats get eliminated. This theory explains several things. It explains why no body was found. If you want to make someone disappear, you take the body far from the scene, dispose of it where it won't be found. It explains the witness report of Paul in a truck, unconscious. And it explains why the search turned up nothing, because Paul wasn't lost in the park. He was taken out of the park. In later years, investigators who revisited the case described the area where Paul disappeared as having bad juju. They suggested it felt like a crime scene, not a lost person scenario. That's cop speak for, this doesn't feel like an accident. This feels like violence. In August 2018, 38 years after Paul vanished, human bones were discovered in the nearby Coronado National Forest. For a brief moment, there was hope. Maybe this was Paul. Maybe, finally, there would be closure. But forensic analysis determined there was no indication the bones belonged to Paul Fugate. They were someone else. Another mystery, another unidentified body. The desert is full of them. In 2018, the National Park Service tripled the reward for information leading to the resolution of Paul's case. It now stands at $60,000. That's a significant sum. And the press release accompanying the reward increase explicitly stated that foul play was suspected early on. Think about that. For years, the official stance was that Paul walked away, that he abandoned his post. But by 2018, the Park Service is publicly acknowledging what many people suspected all along. Paul Fugate was murdered. But by whom? And where is the body? After 40 years, those questions remain unanswered, and the $60,000 reward has never been claimed. There's a cruel irony to this case. Paul Fugate was a searcher. It was his job to find lost people, to rescue them, to bring them home. He was the person you called when someone went missing in Chiricahua. He knew the search protocols. He knew how to track. He knew how to survive. And then he became the lost, the missing, the unsolved, the one who never came home. His co-workers, his fellow rangers, searched for him with the same dedication he would have shown for them. And they found nothing. The land Paul loved, the land he protected, kept him. Or someone took him from it. Either way, the rocks aren't talking. Paul Fugate is the only National Park Service ranger in history to disappear while on duty and never be found. Let that sink in. Rangers work in some of the most remote, dangerous places in America. They face wildlife, weather, cliffs, rivers. And yet, in over a century of the National Park Service, only one ranger has vanished without a trace while on patrol. His case remains open. NPS case file, $60,000 reward, unsolved for over 40 years. His wife, Dodie, fought for years just to get his death legally recognized so she could receive benefits. She was treated like the wife of a deserter, not the widow of a man who likely gave his life in the line of duty. What happened to Paul Fugate? Did he stumble on a drug operation and get killed for it? Was his body taken across the border, buried in the desert, hidden in a place searchers would never look? Or is he still out there, somewhere in the wonderland of rocks, tucked into a crevice so deep and hidden that decades of searching haven't found it? I don't know. No one does. But the drug corridor theory makes the most sense to me. The proximity to the border, the history of smuggling in the area, the witness report of Paul in a truck, the fact that absolutely no trace of him was found despite an exhaustive search, it all points to someone removing a problem. Paul Fugate walked out of the visitor center on a January afternoon in 1980. He was wearing his ranger uniform. his gold badge, his arrowhead patch. He was doing his job, protecting the land, keeping people safe. And somewhere between the visitor center and wherever he was going, he ceased to exist. The rocks of Chiricahua still stand, towering, silent, magnificent. Tourists still visit. They take photos. They marvel at the hoodoos. They walk the trails. And they have no idea that somewhere in those stones, or in the desert beyond, a ranger was lost, or taken, or killed. Paul Fugate loved Chiricahua. He fought for his right to work there. He dedicated his life to it, and it, or someone in it, took him. The $60,000 reward is still active. If you have information, the National Park Service wants to hear from you. Not for the money maybe, but for closure, for Dodie, for Paul's family, for his fellow rangers who searched and never found him. Paul Fugate became a ghost, a legend, a cold case file that haunts the National Park Service to this day. He walked into the wonderland of rocks and never came out. And after 40 years, the only thing we know for certain is that he's still missing. The land of standing up rocks keeps its secrets, and Paul Fugate is one of them. October 14, 2006, Crater Lake National Park, Oregon. It's late afternoon, around 4 p.m. The sun is still up, but the light is starting to change, that golden slanted autumn light that photographers love. The air is crisp. The temperature is dropping, but it's still comfortable. Maybe in the 50s. Crater Lake in October is stunning. Fewer tourists than summer, the water impossibly blue against the volcanic rock. The silence, broken only by the wind and the occasional car passing on Rim Drive. Crater Lake sits at high elevation. The rim is around 7,000 feet. The lake itself is the deepest in the United States, filling the caldera of an ancient volcano. The terrain around the rim is deceptive. It looks open, accessible, safe. There are parking lots, scenic overlooks, paved paths. It feels civilized. But step off the pavement, away from the designated areas, and the landscape changes instantly. Dense forest, steep slopes covered in loose volcanic pumice, sharp, crumbly rock that makes walking treacherous, hidden crevices, drop-offs. The forest swallows sound, visibility drops. Within minutes, you can be completely disoriented. Kenneth Bullock is there with his 2 kids. He's recently separated from his wife, and he's brought his son, Samuel, who goes by Sammy, and Sammy's older sibling on a trip to Crater Lake. It's supposed to be a bonding experience, a chance to make memories, get some fresh air. It's a dad trying to do something good for his kids. Sammy Bilka is 8 years old. He's 4'8", about 85 pounds. He has mild autism. This detail is crucial because it shapes everything that happens next. Sammy's autism manifests in specific ways. He's sensitive to loud noises and bright lights. He loves to hide. Playing hide and seek is one of his favorite games, and he's good at it. He's been known to hide so well that his family has trouble finding him, even when they know he's nearby. He's also fascinated by certain things. Specifically, he loves gold-colored pumice stones, the yellowish volcanic rock scattered around Crater Lake. He collects them. He gets excited about them. Sammy is wearing a black and green striped shirt, cargo pants, a blue winter coat, and, this is important, red suede shoes. Not hiking boots, suede shoes, distinctive, easy to spot, the kind of shoes that would leave clear tracks. Kenneth and the kids stop at a turnout near Cleetwood Cove, one of the scenic overlooks on the rim. The area is open. There are other people around, not a crowd, but it's not isolated. There are cars in the parking lot. This isn't the backcountry, this is a tourist spot. And then Sammy sees something. Maybe it's the pumice, maybe it's just the thrill of open space. He starts running. It's playful. It's a game. Kenneth recognizes it immediately, tag or hide and seek. Sammy is running toward the trees, toward a small slope covered in pumice and scrub. Kenneth chases him. He's maybe 50 feet behind. He's calling Sammy's name, half laughing, half concerned. "Sammy, come back!" It's not panic yet. It's just a dad chasing a kid who's running off. It happens. Sammy crests a small ridge, just a little rise in the terrain. He disappears over the top. Kenneth is right behind him. Seconds. We're talking about seconds of separation. Kenneth reaches the top of the ridge, and Sammy is gone. Kenneth stops. He scans the area. The terrain on the other side of the ridge drops into dense forest, lodgepole pines, firs, thick underbrush. Visibility is maybe 20-30 feet before the trees close in. He calls Sammy's name, louder now. "Sammy, come back. Game's over." Nothing, no response, no sound of footsteps, no rustling branches. Silence. Kenneth runs forward. He's moving into the trees now, calling, shouting. Other visitors hear the panic in his voice. They come over. "What's wrong?" "My son. He ran into the woods. I can't find him." Within minutes, people are spreading out, calling Sammy's name. Park rangers are notified. It's 4 p.m. The sun is still up, but everyone knows the clock is ticking. Temperatures at Crater Lake in October drop fast after sunset. They can fall to the 30s, even the 20s. An 8-year-old in a winter coat can survive that for a while, but hypothermia is a real risk. By 5 p.m., it's a full-scale search operation. Park rangers, search and rescue teams, volunteers, tracking dogs, helicopters with thermal imaging. The response is massive and immediate. Everyone understands the stakes. A child with autism, possibly lost in rough terrain, in fading light, in dropping temperatures. But the search is complicated by Sammy's condition. The rangers know, because Kenneth tells them, that Sammy is afraid of loud noises and strangers. If he hears people yelling, helicopters overhead, search whistles, he might hide. He might think he's in trouble. He might burrow deeper into the brush, into a crevice, under a log, and stay silent even as searchers pass within feet of him. So they modify their tactics. They can't use air horns. They can't use sirens. They have to search quietly, visually, painstakingly. And that slows everything down. The search continues through the night. Flashlights, headlamps, teams sweeping the forest. The dogs pick up a scent near where Sammy was last seen, but the trail is weak, inconsistent, and then, just 3 days later, everything gets worse. October 17th, 3 days after Sammy vanished, a severe winter storm hits Crater Lake. Temperatures drop to 24 degrees. Snow starts falling. Visibility becomes near zero. The helicopters are grounded. Ground teams struggle through the snow and wind. The window for finding Sammy alive is closing fast. Despite the conditions, the search continues. Over 145 personnel are deployed. They search for 5 days in brutal conditions. They find nothing. No clothing, no red suede shoes, no tracks after the initial ones, no body. On October 19th, the search is scaled back. Sammy is presumed dead, though no remains have been found. His case is still open. He's still listed as missing. Now let's talk about the footprints, because this is where the case becomes deeply strange. Searchers did find Sammy's tracks. They confirmed he'd run over the ridge and into the forest. The red suede shoes left clear impressions in the soft pumice. They could follow his trail. But the direction of the tracks made no sense. When a child gets lost, when they panic, they typically follow the path of least resistance. They go downhill. Gravity helps. It's easier. They head toward open ground, toward roads, toward sounds of civilization. They don't climb. Sammy's tracks went uphill, steeply uphill. He was running deeper into the wilderness, climbing into rougher terrain. He was moving away from the parking lot, away from the voices calling his name, away from safety. He was heading toward the dense volcanic slopes where the forest becomes impassable. Why would an 8-year-old do that? Why run uphill into the hardest terrain when your father is calling your name? The searchers had theories. Maybe Sammy was following the pumice stones, the gold-colored rocks he loved. Maybe he saw something shiny, something fascinating, and chased it deeper into the woods. Maybe, in his excitement, he didn't realize how far he was going. Or maybe, and this is darker, he was being chased by something. Not his father, something else. Something that made him run uphill, run faster, run until he couldn't run anymore. Now, here's the part of the case that keeps experts awake at night. Helicopters equipped with FLIR, forward-looking infrared, thermal imaging cameras were deployed quickly. FLIR works by detecting heat signatures. A human body, especially a child's body, radiates heat. In the cold October air of Crater Lake, an 8-year-old should light up on a thermal camera like a beacon. Even if he's under a log, under brush, the heat signature bleeds through. You can find people buried under snow with FLIR. It's incredibly effective, The helicopters scanned the area where Sammy's tracks led. They flew grid patterns. They covered the forest where he'd been heading, and they saw nothing. No heat signature, no bright spot indicating a living child. Just cold ground and cold trees. How is that possible? There are a few explanations, none of them good. Option 1. He was already dead. If Sammy had died quickly, fallen, hit his head, stopped moving, his body would have cooled rapidly in the October air. Within hours, his heat signature would fade. By the time the helicopters were up, he might have been too cold to detect. But that timeline is tight. He vanished at 4 p.m. Search helicopters were in the air by evening. It's possible, but it requires him to have died almost immediately after disappearing. And if he died that fast, where's the body? Option 2. He was hidden. If Sammy crawled into a deep crevice, a cave, a hollow under rocks, the thermal signature might be blocked. Volcanic rock is porous, it can insulate, but searchers checked crevices, they checked caves. They've been searching for 18 years. Nothing. Option 3. He was deeper than anyone thought. Maybe Sammy kept running. Maybe he made it miles beyond the search radius. Maybe he was so far away that the helicopters never scanned his location. But the tracks didn't go that far. They led into a specific area, and then they just stopped, as if he'd been lifted into the air. Expert trackers who worked the case noted something disturbing. Sammy's tracks suggested evasion, the pattern of his footsteps, the direction he was moving, the way he seemed to be avoiding open areas. It looked like he was trying to hide, not from his father, from something else. Was he scared? Was his autism making him misinterpret the search as a threat? Did he think he was in trouble for running away, so he kept hiding? Or was there something else in those woods that frightened him, something that made him run uphill, away from help, into the wilderness? Also, those distinctive red suede shoes should have been found. They're not boots that could last for years, they're suede. They'd degrade, fall apart, be scattered by animals. But even fragments, a sole, a lace, a piece of red fabric should have surfaced by now. Hundreds of hikers have passed through that area over the years. Rangers patrol it. Nothing has ever been found. It's as if Sammy dematerialized. As if he took one more step and crossed into some other place where searchers couldn't follow. This case is uniquely heartbreaking because Sammy's condition likely contributed to his death. If he was hiding from searchers, if he was burrowing into a crevice or under a log and staying silent, he could have been within feet of rescue and never made a sound. Searchers could have walked past him, calling his name, and he might have stayed hidden, thinking he was in trouble. There are documented cases of autistic children who go missing and hide so effectively that they die of exposure, even though search teams passed nearby multiple times. The instinct to hide, combined with fear of loud noises and strangers, can be fatal. But that doesn't explain the tracks going uphill. It doesn't explain the thermal imaging failure. It doesn't explain the complete absence of remains or clothing. Kenneth Bohelka lost his son during a game of tag. Let that sink in. A playful moment. A dad chasing his kid. 50 feet of separation, seconds. And then his son was gone. He spent the last 18 years searching, returning to Crater Lake, walking those slopes, looking for any sign, any clue. He's given interviews, he's kept Sammy's case alive, he wants answers, he wants closure, he wants to bring his son home. But Crater Lake has given him nothing. No red suede shoes, no blue winter coat, no bones, no answers. The prevailing theory is that Sammy, frightened by the initial separation or by the noise of the search, hid so effectively that he died of exposure. The storm that hit 3 days later buried him under snow. Over time, scavengers scattered what was left. The volcanic terrain, full of crevices and caves, concealed his remains. He's still out there, somewhere on those slopes, hidden in a place no one has looked closely enough. But that theory doesn't explain the uphill tracks. It doesn't explain why a terrified child would climb into harder terrain instead of following gravity downhill. It doesn't explain the thermal imaging failure. Or maybe it does. Maybe Sammy ran until he couldn't run anymore. Maybe he climbed into a crevice so deep that his heat signature was blocked. Maybe he curled up, closed his eyes, and the cold took him. And maybe the forest, with its pumice and pines and snow, covered him so completely that 18 years of searching hasn't been enough to find him. Crater Lake is beautiful, impossibly, heartbreakingly beautiful. The water's so blue it doesn't look real. The cliffs are so steep they take your breath away. And somewhere on those cliffs or in the forest below them, an 8-year-old boy with autism ran into the trees and never came back. His father was 50 feet behind him. Seconds, a few seconds of separation, and that was enough. That was all it took for the mountain to swallow him. Sammy Bohulk loved gold-colored pumice. He loved hiding. He loved games. And on October 14, 2006, he played one last game of tag. He ran over a ridge, into the trees, up a volcanic slope, and he kept running. Up, deeper, farther, and he never stopped. The mountain never gave him back. The red suede shoes are still missing, the blue coat is still missing, Sammy is still missing, and Crater Lake, the deepest lake in America, keeps its secrets close. A father chased his son, 50 feet behind, and he's been chasing him ever since.